Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If All Might was Deku's father? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Back Alley Street, Tokyo, Japan 15 years ago, late November. Give me your wallet. The thug flicked his hand up his quirk, turning it into a blade that pressed against the man's neck, drawing blood. Or I'll gut you. Please, I don't have anything on me. The man trembled as he pulled out his empty pockets, showing he had nothing on him. They are in my car. I forgot them, that's why I was here trying to cut back to the pa dash. Shut up. The thug pressed his blade hand into the man's neck even harder. Well, it looks like this isn't your night. The thug moved to press his bladed hand fully into the man's neck and then go elsewhere to look for another target. He had a rep to maintain and a quota to meet. If he didn't have his boss cash on time, it would be him dead in a gutter somewhere. Besides, a little blood on his blade would work wonders, motivating the unlucky souls that came across him for the rest of the night. It's fine now. Do you know why? The booming voice caused the both men's eyes to widen, one in hope, the other in despair, as the thug and his bladed hand disappeared from view. Because I am here. The man's whose life had just been about to end could only blink and then look up in awe as the All Might appeared in front of him. The criminal that was about to take his life was about 100 meters away, laid out on the cold ground, a set of trash cans having stopped him from going further. The man's eyes, however, immediately shot back to All Might, who towered before him, his signature smile on his face as he also glanced down and saw the #1 hero wasn't wearing his iconic costume but a very nice shirt and trousers with a long red tie as well. Thank you. Thank you. The man started to bow to All Might so vigorously that the pro hero was sure the man was going to pull something. All Might opened his mouth to insist that the man need not thank him and ask if the man was okay, if he needed any more help. However, just as he was about to, another voice ran out in the alley. You have a reminder. You have a reminder. You have a reminder. All Might's famous smile stayed plastered on his face, although his eyes widened slightly as the two men stood awkwardly for a moment as All Might's own voice sounded from his pocket. All Might let out a slight cough as he lifted up a hand with a raised finger, asking for a minute, which the man he just saved nodded awkwardly. The man would have laughed if the scene before him was anyone other than All Might, as suddenly the behemoth of a man suddenly turned around and seemed to curl up as he took his phone from his pocket. All Might silenced the reminder that was still yelling out his voice as he read the reminder and several text messages that he had missed. Oh shoot! Toshinori cursed in his head. Not only had the 14 reminders he had set not to miss this meeting had passed, but the one he had just seen was the last, so he officially had only 5 minutes to get there before he was late. And then there were the texts. The person he was set to meet was already there and waiting for him at the time he had insisted that they arrive. This meeting was probably the most important one of his life so far, and its outcome could affect everything for years to come. He looked at the time, and although he was cutting it tight with his enhanced speed, he could make it to the meeting on time if he left now. He quickly sent a text to his sidekick Mirai to send police to this location to pick up the criminal he had stopped. Apologies, citizen, but I am needed elsewhere. All Might turned back to the man he had just saved and then to the mugger he had knocked out. I have alerted the authorities and they shall be here shortly. Oh, of course. The man gave another bow to the pro hero. Thank you again and good luck, not that you need it. All Might gave the man a wave as he leapt into the air and started racing as fast as he could to get to his meeting on time that was on the other side of the city. He had planned on arriving early so that he could get everything sorted for tonight, but like as always, whenever he made plans, they went off the rails the moment he heard a cry for help. He would never regret answering, but it did sometimes make things complicated. Like tonight, he had ended up responding to a dozen incidents that had taken him clear across the city. So a 10-minute drive from Might Tower with plenty of time to spare had turned into trying to race back. Normally he would just cancel whatever plans he had made, but tonight was rare expectation. No, tonight has to happen. I can't cancel, not this. Toshinori stayed firm in his commitment. He would be at this meeting no matter what. I can still make it as long as nothing else happens. Help! Help! Toshinori stopped in his tracks, his head snapping towards the direction the cries for help were emanating from. His body reacted before his mind could even think about it as he pushed off and headed directly to where he was needed. As he arrived, he could see the person shouting. It was a small car collision and one of the passengers was stuck as their vehicle filled with smoke. He leapt down and rushed to help, his arrival causing shouts of joy and cheers from the bystanders. As he easily pulled the door off and recused the trapped motorists, his eyes glanced up to a nearby clock showing that he was now late. Okay, not great, but I'm sure if I push myself I can get th. Hey, stop thief. Someone help. All Might's head snapped as he heard another cry for help. His enhanced hearing picked up not 2 blocks away just as he placed the recused motorist. 2 blocks in the wrong direction. He resisted sighing in public, instead just kept his signature smile on his as he quickly made sure the motorist was fine and first responders were on the way before he rocketed back into the air. His eyes quickly saw the petty thief running down the street, cash falling from the bundles in his hands. He was no amateur criminal. The thief's quirk seemed to be a rather simple one that just made him faster than normal if the speed he was going at was any indication, but he was still no match for the speed one for all gave All Might. Right, stop this guy, turn him over to the cops, and I'm sure I will only be a few minutes late tops. 2 hours and 16 saves later, including 1 actual cat stuck in a tree. All Might landed with a slight thud in the alley just across from his meeting place, his hand shooting to his phone to look at the time and hoping there wasn't a string of scathing text messages from the person he was meeting. Holding on to the vaguest, smallest simple hope that the time wasn't as late as he thought it would be. It was, and more worryingly, there wasn't a single text message beyond the first ones he received telling him that they were waiting for him. I'm so dead. He felt the large beep of sweat form and drip down the side of his head. Toshinori let out a deep breath as he turned off One for All, the physical change occurring immediately as his muscles and size decreased. However, as he spotted his reflection in a nearby window as crossed the street, he could see the change was only negligible at this point. His body had adapted so well to One for All that at this stage he couldn't really turn it off, his muscle form as he called it, even when he tried. However, it was still good enough that Toshinori Yagi and All Might weren't immediately recognized as the same person by the majority of people, allowing him rare moments out of the limelight. As he moved towards his target, the restaurant that had a large fancy sign out the front that read, Ueda's Place, he took another deep breath and checked he still had everything he needed on him. The restaurant was one of the most exclusive and high-end in the city. Usually, it took months to get a seat, but Toshinori had for the first time used his position as the #1 hero to jump the queue. He wasn't exactly proud of it and still felt awkward, but tonight was too important. The restaurant's strict code of privacy was exactly what this meeting required, so he didn't feel too guilty. The hostess greeted him as Toshinori, not All Might. Her eyes gave a quick frown, no doubt wondering who he was and why All Might had called in a favor to get this person and his guest a table for tonight. She guided him first to an elevator and then to the best seat in the house, located on their rooftop dining area right next to the edge that gave the best view of Tokoyo. He paused and let out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. She was still here. Seated at the table he had reserved was the woman who for the past few years had occupied his every thought when he was not working. As she turned to face him, he felt his breath and heart stop for a moment as his deep blue eyes connected with her impossible large and circular pools of emerald green. She gave him such a smile that if could capture this moment and hold it in his head, he would be a happy man for the rest of his life. Inko Hikitsuga. He spent a few moments looking at her. She was wearing a tasteful sleeveless green dress that hugged her slim figure perfectly and stopped at her ankles. Her straight shoulder-length dark green hair was tied into its usual style with the small and spiky ponytail at the back, which always thought looked the same as Nana Shimura's hairstyle. However, he quickly dispelled the thought of his old mentor as he shook himself out of his haze and moved to the table, thanking the hostess before sitting down. As she left to give them a few moments to decide on drinks and a meal, he saw her raise a slight eyebrow at the couple, and he knew why. It was the age difference. Although he knew he looked good for his age, there were still 14 years between himself and the 24-year-old Inko, and no amount of healthy living could hide the age difference. It was one of only 3 things in their relationship that gave him pause. Every time they went somewhere, someone always raised an eyebrow or whispered about them. However, out of all of his concerns, it was the lowest on his list. He knew it didn't look great and some people thought it unseemly to date someone over a decade younger than you, but it had never fazed Inko. The one time he had brought it up early in their relationship, she had laughed, made a witty joke, told him he was being stupid and shouldn't let others dedicate his life, and that was that. The concerns that gave him serious pause, however, were to start with the second on his list was that he was technically her boss. Inko worked in the accounting department at the Might Tower and was very good at her job from what he understood. He said technically he was her boss because Inko worked for a sub-agency contracted by the Hero Public Safety Commission, whose job was to monitor pro-heroes like All Might's expenditure to prevent misappropriation or insufficient funding. However, whenever he made the "I'm only technically her boss" argument in his head, it sounded pretty flimsy and something he made up to avoid the awkwardness of seeing someone under him. He was sure the only reason Inko was comfortable around him was part of the main reason he was concerned about pursuing a relationship. She doesn't know I'm All Might. They had met a few years ago when Inko had first taken up the job with the finance sub-agency at the Might Tower. She had bumped into him as Toshinori in the tower's cafeteria whilst looking for a seat near the windows, wanting a good view of the city she had just moved to, and found the only table with a spare seat next to a window was his. He sat in the cafeteria as Toshinori as a way to keep grounded and get to know the people who worked so hard so he could do his job. His sitting next to a window was so that he could always keep an eye on all the townspeople and watch out in case he was needed, which resulted in him rushing out in the middle of lunch more than once. Inko was the first person ever to ask to sit with him, as despite his intention of getting to know people, the rest of the staff avoided him. Inko later told him it was because they knew he worked on the top floor, something she only learned about 3 months of sitting with him for lunch. The staff knew he worked on the executive level, and although no one had connected him to All Might, they all thought he was some sort of high-powered executive. So they had avoided the strange, well-built tall man in his nice shirts that constantly rushed off to what they guessed were important meetings. According to Inko, some thought he was All Might's personal assistant. So he had to eat lunch alone, well, until a young new starter who apparently didn't know better had sat down. He was also aided by the fact that unlike every other pro-hero, his real identity wasn't a matter of public record and was only known to a handful of highly trusted people. He had spent a lot of energy keeping Toshinori out of the limelight and public records, largely to make it harder for All for One to track him down. So to Inko, he was just Toshinori Yori, a man that worked in the same building as her, in some position on the upper floors, and who she had developed a relationship with despite his best attempts to avoid it. He wasn't sure how it had happened, but he had ended up in the last place he had ever thought he would. A nice one of lunch had turned second one, then into a nice lunch every day, followed by exchanging numbers, then texting and calling each other after a rough day, then meeting outside of work to relax, a few nice dinners together to say thank you, then a secret trip together, for fun, then one night after a very late dinner he spent the night at hers, and suddenly he was in a relationship. He had tried to end it. He knew he should end it. Being with him was dangerous. His mentor's life had shown him how dangerous a family could be in this life. He had kept this under the radar from everyone. No one knew about him and Inko. She had even come up with a fake boyfriend, Hisashi Midoriya, that she used to explain her trips and their dates to her friends. He hadn't asked her to do that, but Inko, being Inko, had figured out that he needed to keep their relationship on the sensitive side, and so came up with the fake boyfriend story, without ever asking why. It was the type of person she was, putting someone else's needs before her own without needing to know the reason. He suspected she thought it was because of company policy about inter-office romances and dating a subordinate. She had even stopped their public lunches together to prevent water cooler gossip. However, every time he worked up the nerve to end it, all the reasonable arguments logged in his head, he just had to see her and they all went away. It was her smile, her laugh that kept him from ending it, but most importantly it was the simple fact that at the end of the day, it was her he wanted to see. Whereas before his goal of being the symbol of peace had been just to make the world a better place, he was now striving for the goal harder than ever before, for her, so she had a peaceful world to live in. Looking at her for the first time since setting himself on this path, the long road to make the world a better place, to create a place where everyone could smile, he wanted just one thing for himself. Toshi. As Inko said his name, he felt all his worries melt away as she looked at him with those eyes he could lose himself in. "What happened to your shirt?" "Huh." Toshinori blinked. Looking down, he saw that his nice freshly ironed shirt was now raggedy, spotted with several stains. His tie was gone, and now he thought about it, he had had a jacket as well. Where had that gone? He let out an awkward chuckle, thinking that maybe the hostess's frown at the entrance at the door and raised eyebrow wasn't at the age difference but at his nearly disheveled appearance. He looked back up at Inko, who was just smiling at him, her emerald green eyes twinkling with mirth at his unkempt state, which had been a running theme for most of their dates. He found himself smiling now. She was truly something else. He was over 2 hours late and she didn't even care as long as he did turn up. I ran into someone who needed help. Inko finished his sentence for him with a large smile, knowing what he was going to say as it had become his catchphrase between the two of them. Well, I've heard worse excuses. Toshinori responded with his own smile at her witty remark as she opened her menu, which he knew she had already looked at and was ready to order but wanted to give him time to decide. He didn't need to apologize for being late. I never do with her. His smile turned tender at that thought. The first time he ran late he had said the line about helping someone and apologized, at which point Inko had told him never to apologize for taking the time to help someone in need. He couldn't stop himself from glancing up at her as he looked over the menu himself, and once they had ordered their meals they fell into their natural flow. As they chatted about work, well, Inko chatted and Toshinori asked questions or made comments as she talked about the slight drudgery of looking at numbers all day, the latest gossip her colleagues told her, and the fact she had taken up sewing. Toshinori took it all in as they tucked into their meals, laughing a little as Inko poked fun at his meal, which his fitness-obsessed nature made sure was as healthy as possible, whilst she tucked into her plate of katsudon. As they finished their meal, Inko took a sip of the glass of water she had ordered and looked out at the view of Tokyo at night. He took a deep breath, deciding that he had put this off long enough. Inko, Toshinori felt his smile somehow widened as she looked back to him, curiosity present as she noticed his unusual softness and slight timidness. There is something I've been meaning to tell, I've been meaning to do for a long time actually, and, well, I hope this doesn't lead you to think I don't trust you. I do, it's just this is complicated and I never thought we get Yes. Inko interrupted him with a chuckle, finding it more amusing than odd that the always clear and confident Toshi was stumbling over himself for once. Right. Toshinori coughed as he regained his focus and then took a deep breath. Inko, I need to tell you that I am actually All Might. Inko finished Toshinori's sentence again for him in a quiet whisper as she glanced at the other patrons. Her smile widened as she saw his eyes widen in shock and surprise. You knew! Toshinori shouted, standing up briefly only to suddenly look sheepish as some of the other tables looked at him. You knew? For how long? About 2 weeks after we started having lunch together. Toshi, you look identical to him, just a little smaller with less muscles. Also, every time you were late or had to run off, All Might appeared on the news saving someone. It wasn't hard to figure out. Inko replied deadpan as if the answer had been so obvious she didn't know why he had asked. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Toshinori felt like punching himself in the face for his stupidity. Of course she had figured it out. Inko saw him every day and was one of the smartest and analytical people he had ever met. Maybe you should try, I don't know, a pair of glasses and styling your hair a little differently when you're not on patrol. We could look at maybe a ponytail style, easy to tie back but simple to undo, or maybe a hat. That could work, or maybe. Inko's face fell into a thoughtful frown as she went full ramble as her mind analyzed everything they could do. Half it was inaudible as she just went faster and faster before suddenly stopping. Sorry, I was rambling again, wasn't I? Only a little. Toshinori chuckled, feeling all the tension and worry that he had been building up for weeks at his decision to tell Inko the whole truth just vanish. I feel like an idiot now. No. Inko leaned over the table and placed her slender slim hand over his much larger one, a cheeky smile appearing on her face. Well, maybe a little. Hey! He shot back with his own grin as he turned his hand over and squeezed hers, the two just looking at each other for a few moments. Still, if it got me this lovely view and a great meal, I don't mind you being a little stupid every now and then. Inko teased without any seriousness, loving the feel of warmth radiating off of Toshinori. Her heart always skipped a little when she saw him looking at her like this. Well, I might have a little more foolishness left in me, and there's more I need to tell you about me and my quirk, but first. Toshinori gripped her hand a little more tightly as his other hand slipped out of sight to retrieve the item that was crucial for tonight and could be used. Now that he knew she was okay with his heroic identity, Inko, I have something very important to ask you. Will dash. Boom. Inko didn't even feel the explosion that blasted apart the top of the building, ripping through the restaurant's top-floor seating. She blinked, and suddenly found that she was behind All Might's towering figure as he shielded her from the explosion. Toshinori had transformed, and as she took in what happened, she could see the other restaurant patrons and staff were strewn on the floor behind him as well. Somehow he had saved them and her all in the time it took her to blink. She knew he was supposed to be fast, but this was insane. She opened her mouth to say something when suddenly a huge bolt of electricity slammed into All Might from his left side whilst a beam of red energy struck him head-on. Ah! All Might roared as he took the brunt of the attacks, his eyes scanning the area, quickly seeing his two attackers. He just needed an opening, then he felt himself move as a third attacker blindsided him on the right. It was a person as tall as him, but his entire body was made out of diamonds, obviously a result of his quirk. He grounded his heels, digging into the floor to prevent himself from moving anymore, and took the diamond hammering into his side. It wasn't ideal, but he couldn't move or else Inko and the other bystanders he had saved would be vaporized. He just had to wait for the other two attackers to run out of steam, and then he could deal with these punks. Die, All Might. Die. The diamond-skinned man grinned like a lunatic as he hammered into All Might's exposed side, tearing his already tattered clothes to pieces. Die, 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 die. All Might gritted his teeth, his mind trying to think of a possible alternative as the two ranged attacks kept him pinned in place. His eyes were also searching for any more surprises. He had been stupid in focusing on the two obvious threats and missed the diamond-skinned man on his right. He already knew who was behind this attack and so could take no chances, especially with Inko now being in the crossfire. Although he kept his smile present, his eyes turned into a snarl as he wondered how this had happened and where he had tripped up. He would never forgive himself for placing her in danger. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the twin attacks of pure energy and electricity keeping him in place died off, as his two attacks ran out of steam. Okay, my turn. All Might exploded into action before he could be pinned again. His fist slammed into the diamond-skinned man next to him. Texas smash. The effect was immediate. The man's diamond skin cracked as he seemed to hover in the air for a second before suddenly being blown back clear across the demolished rooftop dining area. All Might turned, bringing his hands together hard, creating a shockwave that he directed at the woman who had been shooting the red energy beam at him. The woman's eyes went wide as she found herself nearly blown off the roof as the shockwave slammed into her body, causing her bones to vibrate as he went flying. The electricity quirk user didn't fare even better, as before he could even shout or move at seeing his comrades being floored, All Might suddenly appeared before him, his blinding speed sending the air rushing past him. He didn't even get to raise his arms before All Might's fist slammed into his face, sending him careening straight into the floor and into unconsciousness. All of you head to the fire exit now. All Might turned and pointed to the exit, his eyes lingering on Inko when suddenly he felt the red beam of energy slam into him again. You don't play fair, do you? He crossed his arms, moving to position himself so that neither the attack nor the energy blasting off of him would injure any innocent bystanders. As he saw them rush towards the fire exit on the right side of the building and out of harm's way, he pushed off of the ground, leaping into the sky. The move caught his attacker off guard, and before she could redirect her attack, he slammed both of his feet into her, sending her like her friend into the sweet embrace of unconsciousness. All Might let out a breath as he stepped off of his defeated foe, but he had no time to rest as he heard a shout behind him. As he twisted around, he found himself for the first time ever frozen as saw what had made the cry for help. He tried to take a step forward but was halted by a snarling shout. "Stop there or I'll break her neck." The diamond-skinned quirk user lifted up his left hand, and there in his grip was Inko, her feet dangling off the floor. The quirk user did not look great. He was bleeding from the forehead and his diamond skin was cracked and broken all over his body, revealing normal human flesh beneath. All Might's mind went into override, trying to come up with a plan to save her, but everyone put her in some measure of danger, and that was slowing his response. He tensed ready to dart forward, but Inko let out a cry as the diamond-skinned man squeezed her neck, seeing his foe was about to move. All Might felt something well up inside his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't had since he saw his Nana Shimura push him away as she faced certain doom. It was a look that wasn't missed by his foe as the man's eyes winded as he looked between Inko and All Might. What? She's special, isn't she? The villain's mad grin widened as moved his arm more in front of him, swinging Inko like a doll, loving the love of fear in the symbol of peace eyes as she cried in pain. The boss just thought she was one night of fun, but this is perfect. When he finds out, oh boy, he's going to beach. Both men had been too distracted to notice that Inko had been using her quirk to slowly pull a sharp shard of broken diamond skin into her hand. She had then jammed the sharp piece of diamond into the hand, aiming for a crack she could just see from her position. The reaction was immediate. He released her as pain shot through his hand, but as he did so, he backhanded her with his other hand that was covered in broken diamond skin. Ah! All Might's eyes watched the strike hit Inko, and then without thinking he exploded forward, electricity sparking around his right fist as poured all his strength into this punch. Oh sure dash! The villain's eyes just watched as his doom came hurtling towards him with no possible way to avoid it. Crack! Boom! Might Tower, Minato, Tokyo. A few hours later. Inko lifted a hand to her left cheek, feeling the bandages present that were covering her one injury from the villain's attack. The cut wasn't actually all that bad, occurring to the doctor that Toshinori had rushed her to straight after he dispatched the villain who had nearly killed her. The cut was a little deep and would leave a visible scar, but other than that, she was completely fine, although as her finger traced over the bandage, she let out a sigh. She was already subconscious about her looks. She knew she wasn't a great beauty and did wonder what Toshinori saw in her at times, and a scar was the last thing she needed. She sat up and moved off of the medical bed she had been left on. She was still a little surprised that the tower had a whole medical floor she never knew about, but as she thought about it, it wasn't surprising at all. Toshi was dedicated to helping people, so it should be no surprise that the headquarters of his super alter ego would be equipped to aid the city in a medical capacity if needed. She quietly picked up her high-heeled shoes that Toshi had retrieved and left beside the bed for when she got up, electing to go barefoot for the moment as one, the high heels killed her feet, and two, they made noise when she walked in them, and it was something like 4 a.m. She was pretty sure she was the only patient on the entire floor, but didn't want to disrupt someone in case she was wrong. She was supposed to be getting some sleep, but in truth, despite the doctor's orders and early hours, she just wasn't tired. She wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline still coursing through her or her burning longing to just see Toshi. He had been with her as much as he could, but he had been preoccupied with getting her to safety and then had to rush off when his sidekick Sir Night-Eye had come to speak to him about the attack. She needed to speak with him. Not only did she want to know what he was about to ask her, but she had something to tell him too. As she gently pushed open the door to the room she was in, she stopped as she heard a pair of voices in the corridor. The door was open only a crack, but she could see All Might's sidekick Sir Night-Eye standing at the end of the corridor speaking to an extremely short, elderly man with a cane. The elderly man had very heavy wrinkles and a scrawny build with gray and spiky hair, styled short with some bangs hanging forward and a trimmed beard. What was he thinking? Sir Night-Eye shook his head as he spoke to Gran Torino, All Might's old teacher and one of the few people the #1 hero listened to. To do something so stupid and reckless? You think him having a relationship is stupid and reckless, huh? Inko couldn't see Gran Tornio's raised eyebrow from her position, so only got the causal tone he was speaking with. What? No. Sir Night-Eye looked, taken aback at the mere suggestion, however, that was quickly replaced by a frown. He's my friend and I want him to be happy, but... The elder hero pressed his eyes, narrowing a little as he watched All Might's sidekick rub his eyes like he always did when frustrated. But, her? She's one step up from being a college intern. If this gets out, it could ruin his image with a lot of people. Night-Eye shook his head. He still could not understand what had gotten into his friend. He's always been so focused, so dedicated towards his goal. Creating a better world. Why throw it away? Hey, he's as dedicated as ever towards that goal. Gran Tornio grunted, feeling tension rising in his old bones at his student and friend's successor's motives were being challenged, before he sighed. Maybe she helps. Maybe she's the one thing he's allowing in behind that smile he shows the world. Maybe he needs her. Needs her to get him killed. Sir Night-Eye grunted back, his face forming a rare snarl that he quickly shook off. Inko's eyes widened at the pro-hero's words, feeling a cold chill go up her spine. That's uncalled for. Gran Tranio shot back. He didn't know the last Toshinori was seeing, but he hated anyone being talked about like that without a chance to defend themselves at least. It's true, tonight was all because of her. Sir Night-Eye felt the blood rise in him. Tonight was a disaster that could easily have been avoided. All Might got sloppy. He went outside the protocols we created to protect him all to set up a dinner date. We are lucky that he wasn't certain of the info and didn't show up himself. All Might could have been killed, hundreds if not thousands could have been cut in the crossfire as well. I'm not denying tonight how he did what he did was stupid. Gran Tranio conceded and already had a speech ready to give his former student when he saw him. He might be foolish at times, but Toshinori can handle himself. He proved that tonight. Not around her, Sir Night-Eye replied slowly. The older pro opened his mouth to respond, but Night-Eye didn't let him. Don't deny it. You saw the same footage I did before he scrubbed it. He froze. Inko felt the chill that had run up her spine creep into her heart as she recalled seeing All Might standing before the villain, frozen with hesitation. She had seen All Might on the news and internet for years. She had always admired him, knew he won no matter what, was the pillar everyone could rely on, and never showed any fear. Except now she knew something his millions of fans and admirers didn't. He was human. It was easy to idolize All Might and put him on a pillar above everyone, but she knew Toshinori. He was the best person she ever knew, but he had fears and worries like anyone else. What happens the next time? It could get him or an innocent bystander killed. And what if someone learns who she is to him? Every villain, including him, will know all they need to stop the symbol of peace is to get to her. If she stays, it puts everyone in dash. Inko closed the door, not wanting to hear any more. As she sat on the bed she had just left, her mind was already reeling at the picture All Might's sidekick painted. Despite part of her trying to reassure herself, her analytical mind just went into overdrive, going deeper and deeper down a path her heart was screaming at her to avoid. She wasn't sure how long she just sat there staring at the floor, but it was long enough for her mind to play through every scenario she could think of and come to a conclusion she dreaded. Inko! Her head snapped up and saw Toshinori, her Toshi, not the hulking figure of All Might, standing tentatively in slightly open doorway. I'm a quake, she said, trying to make her voice as steady as she could as she looked up at him. I just wanted to check on you. I was just trying to track where those villains had come from. Toshinori moved fully into the room, closing the door behind him, trying to sound more confident than he was. Sorry I took so long. Did you find it? Inko asked, her heart hoping to grab onto one ray of hope, that this was over and that whoever Sir Night-Eye and the man he had been speaking to was behind bars. He didn't respond, his eyes just glanced away from her, giving her all the answer she needed. She closed her eyes briefly, willing herself to do this, but before she could she had to reach out for one last ray in the gathering dark. She opened them, her eyes connecting with Toshi's as he looked back to her. Toshi, are you in danger? Inko was hoping she was wrong and that she didn't have to do what her stupid analytical brain was telling her was her only real choice. Don't joke or brush me off. That villain who held me mentioned a boss. And I heard -it doesn't matter, just tell me, are you in danger? Toshinori just looked at her. He wanted to in that moment just to lie to her, to put this night behind them and go on with their lives. However, he knew he couldn't. He owed her the truth, that what this night had supposed to been about, telling her everything. As he opened his mouth, he couldn't help but wince as the image of his Emstar flashed in his mind. Yes, I am. Toshi's admission caused her heart to sink like a stone. There's a villain, a monster. He runs everything, all the crime, all the corruption, in Japan and across a lot of the global. He's behind it. His name is L-. I can't do this. Inko's whispered words caused him to freeze as his blood turned to ice, as he saw tears running down her cheeks. Normally when she cried it was like a river washing away everything in its path, something he secretly loved about her. He remembered when they had watched a movie with a tragic death scene at her place, he thought he would need to conduct a river recuse with the amount she cried. However, this wasn't that. Her tears were small in volume but more devastating than if they had washed him away. What do you mean? I can't do this, it's all too much. Inko stood up grabbing her things as she rushed towards the door. I'm sorry. Wait please. Toshi grabbed her arm before she could slip past him. His reflexes were such that she never stood a chance. Do they know about me? Inko didn't look at him. Although he held her arm, she was still facing the door behind him. No, it's what I was making sure of. He tried to move closer to her, but she just shifted away from him. He felt his heart wrenching apart as he told her the truth. They don't know about us. They think you were just. I can't Toshi, I can't. Inko's words caused his grip to loosen just enough that she slipped from it and ran out of the door. Toshinori could only turn and look at the closed door, his body for once not leaping into action as just stared at the closed. He didn't move for a good while, long enough that the door eventually opened again. For a brief second, he hoped it was her running back, but instead, he just saw his friend and sidekick Mirai, who the world knew as Sir Night Eye, standing there. I saw her leave. She told me she is resigning. She left the building a few minutes ago. Mirai shifted as he saw the blank, emotionless face of his best friend. He felt his own heart break a little at the sight. Toshi, I am sore dash. It doesn't matter. All Might's towering figure suddenly appeared as Toshinori transformed into his muscle form and strode past his friend. His sidekick didn't say a word or even follow him, knowing it was best to leave him to work through this at his own speed. Toshinori was grateful as he felt his body tremble, especially as he opened up his other hand and saw the ring box he had kept safe throughout the night. He paused briefly as opened it up and saw the emerald-crusted engagement ring he had bought for Inko. His hand trembled for a moment before he stopped it, turning his nerves to steel, as one thought replaced the crushing despair that was raging inside of him. I am going to find all for one and end him. Inko Hikitsuga's apartment, 40 minutes later. Inko hadn't gotten very far into her apartment. She was curled up with her head on her knees as cried like she never had before. She knew she had to do this. All Might couldn't be distracted by her. He had a world to save and he couldn't do it if he was afraid for her safety. All Might was the symbol of peace and justice. She was just getting in the way of that, keeping him from saving the world, all for something as selfish as love. However, she knew that wasn't the reason she had done what she did. No, it had been the danger Sir Night Eye had spoken of her becoming a target. She in truth didn't care about that. She was willing to brave any danger as long as Toshi was beside her and wanted her there, but there's more to consider now. That terrible thought wormed its way back into her head as she lifted her eyes and looked at the doctor's letter she had been keeping in her purse. It's what I was going to show Toshi tonight. She was willing to risk anything to be with him, despite the dangers to her, and she knew she would only push him forward in his quest for peace. She would risk anything except one thing. Her eyes lingered on the words in the doctor's letter. We are happy to confirm the results from the first blood tests and your own positive result. You Inko Hikitsuga are currently 2 weeks pregnant. She didn't read the rest of the letter as her hands went to her stomach and cradled it, hoping she had made the right choice to raise her baby away from danger whilst their fathers saved the world. Mizutofu Children's Park, Mizutofu, Japan, 10 years ago, July. Inko sat on the park bench feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin as she sat next to her friend Mitsuki Bakugo as they watched their children playing. They weren't sure what type of game they were playing, but it was clearly something related to heroes if the names being called out were any indication. She resisted the urge to say something, knowing that pro-heroes were a non-topic in their tiny apartment. However, Izuku, like everyone else his age, loved them and he needed to socialize, so she bit her tongue for the moment. Her eyes glanced at Mitsuki's son Katsuki, who had developed his quirk a few months ago and since then had become the leader of the gaggle of children she was watching. He let off a small puff of an explosion that resulted in Mitsuki yelling for him to be careful. The use of the quirk caused her to frown a little and turn her gaze to Izuku. If Katsuki was the leader of the group, then Izuku was his constant shadow. Both mothers had been thrilled how close their boys had grown. The two were like brothers most of the time, but Inko was starting to get a little worried as she saw their relationship changing. Izuku still hadn't developed his quirk, and the power imbalance between the two was starting to develop into unhealthy territory where Katsuki made all the choices and Izuku meekly followed them. She wasn't the only one noticing the difference, but beyond herself, Mitsuki and Mitsuki's husband Masaru, very few of the adults seemed inclined to do anything about it. She suspected it was due to Katsuki's powerful quirk. She had seen the same thing when growing up. If one had a powerful quirk, you were given a lot of leeway in how you acted. She was also getting worried about her son's lack of a quirk. He had turned 4 a few weeks ago and there was still no sign of it. He had yet to display any sign of attracting objects to him as she could or anything remotely close to his father's quirk. That thought made her pause for a second as her mind turned to Toshinori. She, like everyone else in the world, didn't actually know what All Might's quirk was, only that it made him strong and unstoppable, but beyond that, she had no idea what to be watching out for. Would Izuku suddenly be able to grow powerful muscles like Toshinori did? Or would he one day just start breaking things with incredible strength? Or what if he developed a weird combination of theirs, and who knew what that would look like? I wish Toshinori was here. Inko blinked as the thought sounded in her head before she could dismiss it completely. She would be lying if she said Toshinori didn't cross her mind nearly once a day, mainly because pictures of All Might were everywhere but also because Izuku each day reminded her of him. However, that was largely due to how he acted rather than any physical resemblance on his part to the world's symbol of peace. She was thankful beyond belief that Izuku was nearly the spitting image of her instead of Toshinori, which would have potentially led to awkward conversations as to why he looked like All Might. No, Izuku mostly took after her. He had her round face, her round emerald green eyes, and in all, no one couldn't tell they were mother and son. However, one thing Izuku had inherited from his father which made her worry beyond belief that he would soon show signs of whatever Toshinori's quirk was. Izuku was tall for his age. Toshinori had towered over her, over everyone in fact. It was one of his most distinguishing features. The man stood at over 7 feet tall even when not in his muscle form. As she looked at her son playing with the other children, she could see he was easily the tallest kid in his year group. He wasn't freakishly tall, but he was close. Looking at him, she could tell that he was going to at least resemble his father in height. Each year Izuku always grew a little faster than the other kids, and she guessed it would be the one thing he would always beat his friend Katsuki on. Speaking of Katsuki, the boy had let off another explosion, although this one was a little more powerful than the sparks and puffs he normally did. It also appeared hot enough that it burnt the ground in front of him a little. "Hey, if you do that one more time, you little brat, I will end you." Mitsuki exploded to her feet, her fiery parenting style on display as she yelled at her kid before sitting back down again. "That kid, he gets his quirk and it's all bang bang boom, boom all the time. Why couldn't he just get mine? I swear if he breaks one more piece of furniture I am sending him to an orphanage." "What did he break this time?" Inko gave her friend a little smile as she pulled out her thermos and poured out 2 cups of tea, passing one to her friend. "The fridge, he wanted some milk and instead of asking for help, boom." Mitsuki gave a little sigh as she sipped Inko's tea. "No fridge door. I swear the quirk counseling at their school is a joke." "Well, I'm sure he'll get control soon." Inko gave her friend a supportive grin but couldn't help her eyes darting to her son and frowning a little. "Oh shit, sorry Inko." Mitsuki gave an apologetic look as she looked awkwardly at the kids. The two had spoken on the topic more than once in recent months. "Here I am complaining about my kids' quirks and I haven't asked how Izuku is handling things on the quirk front." Enthusiastic, can't wait to get it. Inko just sipped her tea, not looking her friend in the eye as she looked at the children playing. "We've got a doctor's appointment next week to see a specialist." Inko tried her best to hide her slight worry about what the test was going to show. Her fears that Izuku would develop a quirk exactly like his father terrified her. She knew despite her rule against talking about pro-heroes at home that Izuku idolized them, and she suspected he had watched a certain video of All Might saving people on their computer when she was cooking. What scared her most wasn't people linking him to All Might, but that if he developed the same quirk he would follow his father down the same path. She knew she was slightly biased because of her fears. She did admire All Might and respect what he had done, but she was more aware than most of the dangers his life imposed on him. "Inko, is Izuku a BSTD?" Mitsuki's question caused Inko's eyes to widen and look directly at her overly blunt and direct friend. "What?" Inko's panic was mixed with shock at the brazen question, not sure how to respond to the sudden line of questioning. "Inko, we've been friends for over 4 years now and have practically raised our boys together. I've never met your husband, Hisashi, and the photos you have of him look like the stock photos of the fashion magazine we work for. Mitsuki stayed calm as she sipped her tea, her eyes darting to the other moms sitting close by but out of earshot of them. Also, every time something even remotely related to him, like Izuku's quirk, comes up you get all weird, cryptic and lost in thought. And you touch that scar on your cheek. Inko blinked as she removed the hand from her face that had been tracing the faded but still visible scar on her face. And how does that make you think Izuku is illegitimate? Because I'm a model who has seen all the shit women go through because of men. I've seen girls become mistresses, have affairs, one-night stands gone wrong, date a villain, get into drags and the rest of it. I've seen the aftermath too when the BS artists leave after the fun is gone. Mitsuki's eyes for once weren't filled with fierce competition or fiery resolve but a gentleness that came with experience. Look, I'm not judging, but you react like every girl I know who has a kid whose dad is someone important or dangerous or both and they can't talk about it. I just wanted you to know I'm here for you, no judgment. Inko was quiet for a few moments, her eyes leaving her friends as she then stared at the ground, gripping the cup of tea in her hands. She wanted to put on a smile and pretend Mitsuki was wrong. She could get angry, but that wasn't Inko's speed, and besides, Mitsuki was just trying to be a good friend. Her eyes darted up and saw Izuku smiling as he and Katsuki saved one of the other children. Her baby boy saw her looking and gave her a wave which she returned before letting out a sigh. Izuku's father is? It's complicated and staying was dangerous. It's why I moved here to keep my baby safe. Inko wasn't sure if she was feeling a weight lift off of her or her chest tighten as she decided to trust her friend with her fears. I'm just worried about Izuku's quirk. If he takes after his father, it's going to be. Did he give you that scar? Mitsuki was soft and gentle in her tone, not wanting to push her friend. She had met a few young models whose boyfriends had gotten rough with them. No, he would never hurt me. Inko's response caused her friend to nod slowly, her eyes taking in Inko, and decided to believe her. She was far too calm for it to be a lie to cover up old abuse. So, can I ask what happened? Mitsuki pressed, gently, wanting to help her friend who she could see was carrying something that had been troubling her for years. Izuku's father and I were together for a few years. I loved him so much, but staying became complicated and potentially dangerous. Inko resisted the urge to touch the scar on her face again, especially now that she knew people noticed she did it when Izuku's father was mentioned. Was he married? Mitsuki's question was awkward. She loved Inko like a sister, and the woman didn't seem the type to have an affair, but it would make sense. A powerful man having an affair could be dangerous. No, nothing like that. Inko chuckled at her friend's awkward shifting before looking her right in the eye. He doesn't even know about Izuku. I left before he found out. His work was dangerous and I didn't want to expose a child to it. Okay, I won't press. Mitsuki gave her a smile, seeing Inko was grateful but done sharing any more details about Izuku's father. But if you ever want to talk or anything, let me know. Although I will say one thing about this mysterious man of yours. Oh yeah, what's that? Inko raised a curious eyebrow. If he let you go, he must be the world's biggest idiot. Mitsuki drained the rest of her tea and smiled at her friend just as another explosion happened in the direction of the children. That's it, you little brat. Come here. I'm going to end you. Inko could only chuckle as she watched Mitsuki rushing towards her son, the other children rushing away from the raging woman who had a visible aura of terror coming off of her. The only two children that didn't move was Mitsuki's son Katsuki, who seemed to ignore his mother's yelling, and her own son Izuku. She couldn't help but smile as her son tried to defend his friend from his mother's wrath, only for Katsuki to shout at him that he was fine. That caused her smile to drop a little, but Izuku didn't seem to care and just kept trying to help. Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe it will all be okay. Midoriya family apartment, Mizufu, Japan, 10 years ago, the day after the specialist appointment. Inko stood still as she washed the plate in her hand again for the 10th time. Izuku was in her room, which doubled as her office. She could hear the video he was watching. It was the famous clip of All Might's debut on his return to Japan. She would normally go in and turn it off, but right now she didn't have the heart. She wasn't sure what to do as she stared blankly at the plate in her hand, Out of everything that had ever crossed her mind with Izuku, this had never even remotely registered on her radar. She knew something was wrong after they had run a whole battery of tests and left them in the doctor's office alone for over 3 hours. However, even then she had never expected this. "Sorry kid, it's not going to happen," the specialist's cold tone and blunt words echoed in her head as she felt anger rise in her at his callous approach. "Oh shoot." Inko looked down and saw she had cracked the plate in her grip and cut her hand a little, quickly putting the plate to the side and running the cut under the tap. She hadn't really spoken to Izuku since it had happened that they had got back so late that she had just curled up with him on her bed and held him. Her son was quirkless. The shock of it was still catching up to her. She knew about 20% of the population didn't have a quirk, but she had never actually met anyone who was quirkless. The closest she had ever got were friends who had relatives that were quirkless, but even then they always seemed to be living somewhere else or out of sight. No one wanted to talk about it, but she knew that a lot of quirkless people ended up in dead-end jobs, or worse, they also had a very high rate of sway. "No. We are not going there." Inko shook the thought out of her head. As her eyes glanced to her room, the door was ajar, and she could hear sound coming from it. "Oh baby, what can I do? What can I say? Would Toshinori know what to say?" That thought caused her to take a deep breath. That wasn't an option now more than ever. She knew how the world would react if they found out All Might had a kid. The pressure that would put her boy under the expectations of him, the dangers. But All Might having a quirkless kid? Izuku was already in for a lifetime of hardship as a quirkless person. He didn't need that added to by being the poor quirkless son of the world's greatest hero. She felt her heart tearing itself apart at the thought of her Izuku being torn apart by the society that worshipped his father for failing to be like him through no fault of his own. One question was lingering in her head though as she kept her bleeding hand running under the tap. How had this happened? Her parents both had quirks, and so had all of her grandparents and her great-grandparents. They were all gone now, but she never knew anyone in her family not having a quirk. She didn't know much about Toshinori's family. He had only told her they died in a villain attack and she had never pressed. However, he was All Might, so she didn't doubt that his family probably had a history of powerful quirks, so that couldn't be it. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, as she concluded it must have been her side of the family, some quirkless relative no one ever talked about, that she had done this to her son. She knew he wanted a quirk more than anything else in the world. She knew that despite her only strict rules about no hero talk in the house, that her son wanted to become a hero. "Oh God, Izuku, I am so sorry. I wish the war dash." Inko felt the tears starting to flood out of her, but they were halted as she felt something warm on her leg. As she looked down, she could see that in her haze of emotional turmoil thinking about Toshinori, Izuku and her failing him, she hadn't noticed he had slipped from her room. Her son was hugging her legs so tightly, and although she could see he had been crying, he had dried his tears as he tried to hug her as well as his small frame would allow. He had even fixed a broad smile on his face that didn't even remotely reach his eyes, but in that moment it didn't matter as he looked up at her. He took after his father so much without even the remotest hint about who he was. "Mom, don't cry please." Izuku was clearly a wreck himself, but all he cared about right now was that his mother was crying and he wanted it to stop. "I'm okay. See, I'm smiling. Please don't be sad. I'm sorry if I made yo dash." It was Izuku's turn to be cut off as Inko suddenly pulled him tight to her, momentarily knocking the air from his small lungs. She was holding him now off of the ground, clutching him to her chest as he wrapped his small hands around her neck, trying with all his might to make her happy. She fought back her own tears as all the things she had planned to say to him went out of her head, the apology she was going to blurt out and how sorry she was his dream was never going to come true. She knew that was the truth though, that despite his hope and longing of becoming a great hero like his father, he was doomed to live a life in the shadows. However, as she pulled back from the hug and saw him still smiling at her, she knew that tough conversation could wait another day. Her eyes went from her son to his room. It was tiny like the rest of the apartment and apart from a few toys was completely bare. He had wanted posters of heroes all over the walls but had stopped that when she had told him no, the same with more than a few action figures he had pointed to when they were out. However, Izuku was incredibly well behaved for a 4-year-old, and although he hadn't understood and been sad at the event, he had never cried or pushed her on it. She knew her avoidance of pro-hero worshipping made her at best an oddball and at worst a social pariah. Even amongst fully grown adults, not liking the pro-hero scene was seen as crazy. However, try as she might, just couldn't look at any hero without seeing Toshinori and the devastated look on his face the last time she had seen him. What didn't help was that it was usually Toshinori's face that she was seeing. All Might was so omnipresent amongst heroes that she believed like 9 out of 10 photos of heroes were just him. That notwithstanding, she knew the real reason she had always avoided it was because she had been terrified of Izuku following down Toshinori's path and living a life filled with violence and danger. He's been so brave, he deserves something to make this day not a total wreck. Inko turned her attention back to her son, plastering her own fragile smile on her face. And it's not like he's at risk anymore of becoming a pro, is it? We can let him dream a little. It's what Toshi would do, let him dream before settling him into reality. Izuku, why don't go get your shoes on? Izuku gave him a little squeeze as she put him down on the floor, bending over so she could look him right in the face with her wide smile. We are going down to that store you love. I think someone deserves something for being such a brave boy, don't you? Really? Izuku's eyes widened. The shock of his mother agreeing to take him to the hero shop stopped all tears flowing. Yes, really, if you are quick you might even get 2. Inko gave her son a teasing ruffle of his already messy hair and chuckled as he shot out of the room. As he left, she stood up, allowing the worry and concern to return to her face, which stopped for a moment as she felt her hands stinging again. She looked down, remembering the cut, and whilst Izuku raced to get ready, she placed a plaster on the wound, the bleeding having decreased to barely anything. When Izuku returned ready for his treat, she quickly plastered on another smile, offered her hand, and gladly took him out of the apartment. The shop wasn't very far from their home, and Inko knew exactly where it was, as she had made a point to avoid passing it unless absolutely necessary. It was a typical hero store, a mix of arcade, toy store, and general paraphernalia that Ultra fans collected, and it was filled mostly with children and teenagers. She gently guided Izuku through the store, her eyes fixed ahead of her as she ignored the omnipresent pictures of All Might that was everywhere, but she could bear it for now. She let go of her son as they reached the section of the store that was a bit quieter than the rest and looked age-appropriate. As he rushed off to look at all the hero stuff on sale, she couldn't help feel the worry return to her. Free sample, miss? Inko blinked and saw a store employee was offering some sort of chocolate-covered treat in the shape of a hero she didn't recognize. You can have as many as you like. The kids don't seem interested today and they are just going to be chucked. Oh, and dash. Inko held up a hand to refuse but stopped as her eyes caught Izuku again darting between action figures as she felt her stomach flip with worry. Well, maybe just one. She just watched her son for a few minutes, not noticing that she not only ate the first snack but her hand quickly returned to the employee's plate, stopping them leaving. The young employee shifted a little uncomfortably as the mother just gazed at her son whilst devouring the entire plate without saying a word to him. He was more than a little when the green-haired boy bolted back over, clutching one of the more popular items the store solid for children, a Silver Age All Might action figure that set up to 100 different phrases. Look mom, it's All Might. And he talks. Izuku was almost leaping into the air with excitement as he pushed All Might's chest. I am here. Izuku was so enraptured by his idol speaking that he missed his mother, flinching at hearing Toshinori's voice. Can I get it, Mom? Please? Izuku looked up, just missing his mother's reaction as she put on a smile that could only fool a child as the store employee glanced at her, a little bit worried now. Of course, sweetheart, Inko said as her hand went automatically for the now empty tray, her brow furrowing as she failed to pick up another comforting snack, her eyes going to the tray rather than the employee. Oh, you don't have any more, do you? Might Tower Annual All Might Charity Gala, 10 years ago August. I am here. All Might landed on the stage before the flashing lights of cameras and the applause of the crowd. To thank you for coming. Now please have a great night and remember, every donation helps a number of worthy good causes. All Might felt himself go on autopilot for the next few hours as he greeted, smiled, posed, autographed anything offered, and generally sold the charities to the rich and famous around him. He didn't necessarily hate this annual event. In fact, he was extremely proud of the record-breaking amount of money each year the gala raised. He just wished it all was A bit less. It was basically an entire night of just standing around for him, so rich people could gawk at him, say they met the #1 hero and take a photo. However, he could bear all that for the good tonight did, although it didn't stop him from twitching a little. He was a man of action and standing around really wasn't his thing. And finally, this is Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu of the Yaoyorozu Corporation. All Might returned to complete focus as the event coordinator introduced the last people he had to speak to. They are the top donors tonight. It is a pleasure to meet you. All Might gave the couple a bow of his head and his best smile, which earned grins from the extremely wealthy couple. The pleasure is all ours, Mrs. Yaoyorozu responded as she and her husband moved next to him their photo could be taken. We are huge admirers of yours, as is our daughter. She wants to be a hero just like you. Then I wish her all the best. The world can never have enough people striving to make it a better place. All Might responded as the last photo was taken and the couple shook his hand. Indeed, thank you All Might and have a pleasant evening. Mr. Yaoyorozu and his wife gave a deep bow before moving off, wanting to let the symbol of peace enjoy his evening without further interference. All Might waited for a few moments, making sure no one else wanted a photo before he moved off himself, making a beeline for the back of the house area the event coordinator cordoned off. Once he was safely out of sight, he released all the tension and power coursing through him, resulting in the only slightly less muscular form of Toshinori appearing. He released a sigh as he readjusted his bow tie and headed back out to speak with his sidekick Sir Night Eye about their current operations and investigations. He could have just done it in his All Might form, but in truth, he was just tired now and a quick conversation without someone wanting him for an autograph or photo. He weaved through the crowd, his massive height and frame making it a little difficult as Toshinori didn't command the same level of deference and respect All Might did. So he was constantly forced to apologize, wait for people to move, or else just find a completely different route when the odd person wouldn't make way. It took him about 20 minutes to reach Sir Night Eye even though he was less than 100 yards away from him, all of which earned him a rare full smile from Mirai. Enjoying yourself? Mirai teased as he arrived next to him, squeezing past one particular older woman who glared at him for forcing her to move his seat. Of course, nothing like battling the forces of overcrowding and buffet lines. Toshinori gave a chuckle as he gestured to the event around them, which every year just got more packed. So how are we doing? Very good. We over last year's donations and the night is still young. I might suggest another appearance later, crack a joke or make a thank you speech, and we should go plus ultra tonight, Mirai responded, readjusting his glasses as he and Toshinori walked around to avoid being overheard. Good, and how are we doing on the other thing? Toshinori asked, his eyes darting to people they passed, but he relaxed as he didn't see anyone trying to listen in. We are progressing. The dismantling of that trafficking ring was certainly a blow, but it's made the ones I had my eye on go to ground, so it's made it more difficult at the moment. His sidekick released a sigh as he delivered his less than ideal news, but did perk up at the one silver lining he had come across. However, I did meet someone during the investigation. He is a detective. His name is Tsukachi. He's got an interesting quirk, does solid work even without it, and I think you should meet him. Can we trust him? Toshinori hated that he had to ask, but his nemesis had more than a few cops on his payroll and they had been burnt before, working too closely with the police as a result. I believe so. I'll keep looking into him, but at the moment he's as honest a cop as I have ever seen. Mirai responded, knowing he needed to triple-check everything and keep digging to be certain. Good, good. Toshinori gave a nod as the two stopped walking and stood by a standing table next to the dance floor. The two stood in a comfortable silence for a while, with Toshinori just watching the crowd and Mirai doing the same, occasionally glancing at his friend. However, Mirai quickly saw that Toshinori wasn't watching the whole crowd. His friend's eyes were lingering on a woman on the edge of the dance floor across from them. He knew immediately where his friend's mind was, as the woman possessed a very particular shade of light green hair, and when she turned her back to them she looked very similar to someone neither hero nor sidekick had seen in nearly 5 years. Mirai was about to say something, but the look on Toshinori's face kept him silent. It was a look that he had rarely seen from the world's greatest hero, and he knew it was best just to leave him for a few moments. The first few times he had interrupted Toshinori when he was like this, it hadn't ended well. The man hadn't been rude or angry, but he had then thrown himself back into hero work to an even more unhealthy level than he already did. Toshinori had never spoken about Inko again, at least not to him, and for a time Mirai thought that his friend had put the whole incident behind him, that it was a momentary distraction, and he realized how wrong he had been in pursuing it. However, in the years since he would catch Toshinori every now and again looking at a woman, a scene or something else with a hint of longing and sadness. Mirai was never sure what to do when these moments happened. Every time he looked back on Inko and the events of that night, he felt a twinge of regret. He had been so certain that she was a mistake at the time, and when he had spotted her listening in to his conversation, he hadn't held back for both her sake and Toshinori. Their life was dangerous, and he knew that if she stuck around it would have endangered everything, likely gotten herself or at least someone killed, and his friend would never have been able to live with that. However, since she left he had seen a change in Toshinori. In public All Might was the same as ever, but in private his friend and idol had become more muted and slightly grim. His friend spent less and less time as Toshinori, and every chance he had he was All Might, even when he didn't need to. Even when he was Toshinori he was far less sociable, he rarely talked to regular people, he had stopped taking lunch in the main cafeteria and seemingly didn't have time for anyone new unless it was related to finding All for One. He hadn't been idle watching his friend change and had tried to help, even to the point he had tried to set Toshinori up on a few dates with several female pro-heroes. That had been a disaster that he wasn't going to get into and had only seemingly driven Toshinori further down the rabbit hole he was in, and he was starting to get worried for his friend. Mirai looked from the woman Toshinori was looking at back at his friend, his mind racing to a thought he was considering more and more. Maybe I should look up Ink Dash. Sir Knight. Mirai turned and saw it was one of the gala's coordinators holding a clipboard in her hands. We need you for several things backstage. Mirai frowned a little and looked from the coordinator to his friend, but before he could say anything Toshinori just gave him a broad smile and waved him away. Go and let me know if you need me, okay? Toshinori's words earned him a nod from his sidekick, who left to sort out whatever issue had arisen. The moment he was out of sight, however, Toshinori felt the smile fall from his face as he turned his attention back to the dance floor and saw the green-haired woman had moved out of his sight. He let out a thankful sigh at that. Tonight was supposed to be about raising money for a number of good causes. He needed to focus on that, not on her. He regretted even the passing thought of Inko as it caused an image of her to flash in his head. She was a green dress, twirling around the dance floor and laughing at his poor moves. The memory returned a smile to his face as he remembered the gala from 5 years ago where he had brought Inko as his secret date. They had shared one dance under the guise of friendship. What I wouldn't give to just see her again, let alone dance. Toshinori felt the smile again fade from his face as he watched the dance floor where a number of couples were pressed close together. I could always look her up and see if Toshinori winced a little as his more rational side that resided in his head reared to life again, smacking down the foolish thought his heart kept trying to raise. When she had first left he had nearly run after her, been so close to chasing her down and promising anything to get her to stay, but he knew he couldn't. He had a job to do. So he had distracted himself any way he could. For the first few months after she left he had chased down every lead on the people who had attacked them, where they came from, who supported them, who paid them, all of it. He had hoped if he pushed hard enough at that door it would lead him to All for One so he could finally end that monster and the terror he wrought on the world. However, like every other route to the monster he had taken, he had dismantled a part of All for One's criminal empire, made the world safer and saved lives, but never came close to reaching the man himself. After he had exhausted that avenue, he found himself stuck again, and that had led to more than a few nights of him being alone with his thoughts that invariably turned to her. So he had further distracted himself by going full steam at the underworld, not leaving a moment for doubt, loneliness, or regret to creep in. There was also strategy to this approach beyond keeping himself occupied. Their old method of targeting key points of All for One's operation to reach the man hadn't worked. So Toshinori had decided that the only way he was ever going to stop All for One was to dismantle not pieces of his empire but the whole thing, all at once. Mirai wasn't thrilled at the approach as he thought it was stretching All Might too thin and that it would take years for it to work. All for One's empire was huge and reached across the world. However, that didn't deter Toshinori at all. If it took years, it took years. This was the only way he saw it reaching his nemesis and ending his terror. He had to be the unstoppable hero, the symbol of peace and justice, the force that no criminal could resist. He had to overwhelm all for one's ability to operate. If he didn't, the criminal would just regrow like a weed elsewhere. If he broke up the monster's empire quicker than he could rebuild it, eventually the snake would show himself. He would have to prove to the criminal underworld that he was in control. When that happened, All Might would be there. For his Emher and all the others the monster had hurt, he would finish it. His unrelenting assault on All for One's operations hadn't gone unnoticed by the world, and although Mirai was skeptical, he was already seeing progress. The crime rate in Japan had dropped steadily in the last 4 years. The public was calling it his golden age, and criminals were becoming less frequent. He could feel the change he had wanted to bring about for so long coming into effect. All he had to do was keep pushing, and the world he dreamed of would become a reality. A world where everyone can smile, where everyone is safe, where she is safe. Might Tower, Tokyo, Japan, 5 years ago April. Mirai Sasaki sat quietly watching an old clip of his friend saving people from a burning derailed train. The incident wasn't one of All Might's more famous saves and had largely been forgotten by the general public, but Mirai had always liked it. He was watching it right now to calm his nerves and had one hand clamped down on his right leg to prevent it from tapping on the floor and revealing his inner turmoil to the people around him. He had spent years crafting his calm, controlled persona to the public, police, and fellow pro-heroes. He did not need it ruined, all because he couldn't get his leg from tapping. We have confirmation. Mirai lifted his eyes from the screen to Detective Naomasa Tsukachi, who had just glanced at the old clip he was watching. A smile appeared for a second before the detective refocused on him. The plan worked. The raids were successful, and All Might apprehended Toxic Chainsaw. It was public and certainly drew attention. How is he? Mirai gave a quick glance at the room, which was largely empty despite the size of the operation they had just undertaken. Apart from himself and Naomasa, only about a dozen other people were present, all of whom had been vetted, screened, and questioned by himself and the deceitive more than once. They were a very odd mixture of several other detectives, a couple of pro-heroes who worked more behind the scenes, and highly skilled employees who worked in the tower. The people in the room represented the only people he had any confidence in. Even then, his trust in them didn't extend very far. Only Naomasa and himself knew the full extent of what had just unfolded and how large-scale it had been. Doctors have looked him over, he's fine. The fight was brutal and Chainsaw got a few hits in, but nothing major. Naomasa gave his own glance at the room before passing the tablet he was holding to All Might's sidekick. However, we have a little problem. What problem? Mirai felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew something was going to come up, but this was far too quick. He took the tablet, and as he looked at the raid's results, his eyes widened. This can't be right. Is this number right? Yes, I've checked it 4 times, also had the numbers hero, decimal look over them. Naomasa leaned in, pretending to be looking at the pad as he whispered to the pro, feeling uncomfortable as well. They are right, and we aren't even finished yet. Where is he? Mirai turned off the computer he was sitting at and stood up. His sudden motion caused several people to look at him, but he ignored them. He's in his office, Naomasa replied, and didn't even wait for a response before heading to the door as Sir Night Eye was already striding towards it. The two didn't say anything as they moved quickly from the command center they had set up in the tower to the very top floor of the tower. The only thing that stopped Mirai from bursting into his best friend's office was the imposing and nearly impenetrable vault-like door that blocked the entrance to All Might's office. The Might Gate, as the staff of the tower called it, was a well-known feature of the tower. It made All Might's office arguably the safest location in all of Japan, and it would only open for All Might himself. When Naomasa first encountered it, he thought it was slightly overkill, but now he knew the full extent of what the symbol of peace was fighting. He believed that the gate and the office's security system might not be enough. They weren't stopped for long, however, as the vault-like door started to turn and hiss as it opened, allowing them entrance to the office of the world's greatest hero. There were literally thousands of posts and theories across multiple fan sites as to what All Might's office looked like, and honestly, in Naomasa's opinion, they would all be disappointed. The office wasn't very large. It had 2 desks present. One was massive and completely bare apart from a few framed photos. The other desk was small and piled with paperwork with a framed photo of All Might on the wall behind it. The only other real feature of note was a bed tucked into the corner office next to a walk-in bathroom with a shower. Originally Naomasa had assumed the bed and bathroom were for if All Might worked too late to go home. However, he had quickly deduced that All Might didn't keep a permanent residence. The symbol of peace moved around sporadically, largely staying in hotel rooms or short-term rents. The office with its bed was the closest that All Might had to a home. So, how did the raids go? Toshinori asked in his normal form. He was placing a shirt over his extremely muscled torso that showed more than a few bruises from his fight. I'll tell you that punk landed some hits. We have a problem. Mirai stepped fully into his role as All Might's sidekick Sir Night-Eye, his calm calculating demeanor going into override as he walked up and handed Toshinori the pad. What happened? Did someone get hurt or were there civilian casualties? Damn it, I knew I showed dash. Toshinori's heart went into panic mode. He should have led the raids himself and not gone to arrest the punk with the chainsaw. Toshi, breathe, stop, focus, and just read the pad. Sir Night-Eye's steady calm voice cut off his friend before he could spiral further, tapping said pad to draw focus to it. Toshi stopped as instructed, took a grounding breath and then looked at the digital pad that he had been given. His eyes narrowed as he went through it all. The raids had been a success and yielded the results he had suspected they would. It would be a great blow too. Toshi's eyes widened as he saw that the information just kept going and going and going. The raids hadn't just succeeded, they had been far more successful than he, Night-Eye, or Detective Tsukachi could have predicted. Not that was an issue for All Might, but it might complicate the next stages of the plan or cause them to accelerate. After years of smashing one of All for One's operations after another, and then going full steam at everything all at once, they had gained a pretty good idea of the extent of the criminal empire. Naomasa and Mirai had then used that picture together with scraps of information they had pieced together over the years to finally start tracing the thing all the illegal operations needed to function. Money. It had been Naomasa's project for the last few years. Whilst All Might smashed the villains on the street and Night-Eye scoped out the criminal enterprises they ran, the detective traced every yen, dollar, pound and euro that funded them, all of which had accumulated into today's raids across not just Japan but the globe as well. Using Naomasa's information, they had discovered hundreds of front businesses, dummy accounts and physical stash houses across the world that they estimated funded large swathes of All for One's empire. The tough part had been not tipping their hand as to how much they had uncovered. So for the past few months, the three of them had been setting up separate raids across the world with multiple police departments and heroes. The key was for no one apart from them to know all the raids were linked or even happening. They were all independently scheduled to happen at the same time, so no one had time to react. All Might had provided the cover for the operations in Japan by engaging in the apprehension of Toxic Chainsaw, a villain who was not only at the top of the most wanted list but Night-Eye believed ran All for One's drag operations in the central prefectures. His arrest had been a public brutal fight that had drawn media attention away from the hundreds of raids of businesses, warehouses and even homes occurring across the country. Is this number right? Toshinori finally spoke as he reached the end of the summary that concluded with the total amount of assets seized. Yes, and it's only going to get larger, Naomasa responded, moving forward next to Mirai as Toshi leant back on the front of the larger desk. The departments and heroes are still going through the files, accounts and physical stacks of cash they seized. That's just an initial summary. An initial summary this. Toshinori felt his eyes widened again as he looked at the already insane number on the pad. Too much, Night-Eye spoke up, releasing a sigh, as the carefully laid plan they had to cripple All for One's empire had turned into what looked like a death blow. We didn't anticipate this, although in hindsight I should have factored in how much damage we had already done. They must have been consolidating resources to restructure after Yokohama. So, in essence, we just got very lucky. Toshinori looked from the pad to his sidekick, releasing a chuckle, finding it funny that even after all his years as a hero, sometimes the biggest successes just come down to luck. I wouldn't call it that. Naomasa's voice was subdued and he shared a knowing look with Night-Eye as the two shifted. Why? Toshinori felt himself frowning as his two closest allies in the world seemed more defeated than jubilant at the blow they had just struck. Because although I know All for One will have more resources, the man has been operating for who knows how long. This amount of money is. Mirai paused as he struggled for a second to find the right words for the magnitude of what they had done, is beyond crippling. This is going to shatter not only his empire but his control of the underworld. We aren't prepared for that. It's also going to force All for One to respond. Naomasa lent his voice to Night Eye's case, causing Toshi to shift focus to the detective. So he's going to retaliate? Toshi felt his burrow furrow, disliking that their success was going to cause more danger not less. No, he's going to draw you somewhere and kill you. Naomasa responded, shifting as he saw All Might fix. For all his talk, All for One is a crime boss, and they all need the same two things to keep control. Fear and money. We just shatter both of those, so the only way for him to regain any control is to to kill me. Toshi responded. His voice was calm and even more so than his usual simple bravery, which caused Naomasa's eyes to widen in confusion but Night Eye's to narrow as a sudden realization dawned on him. You knew. Night Eye's whisper caused both Toshinori and Naomasa to turn to him as the sidekick felt himself go pale. Naomasa, please could give us a few moments. Toshinori just put the pad down on the large desk behind him as he looked at the police detective. Naomasa trailed off as he looked at Sir Night Eye and then back to the symbol of peace, before just giving a nod. I'll go see how the cleanup is going. Neither of the heroes spoke until they heard not only Naomasa leave but the great grinding gears of the Might Gate halt sealing them in the office. Toshinori for a moment felt as if he should turn into his muscle form and deal with what was about to happen from a position of strength. However, he resisted that urge. Mirai wasn't a villain to be beaten or a self-serving bureaucrat to be ignored. He was his best friend and sidekick. Mirai just took a deep breath before. You knew the raids were going to yield more than myself and Naomasa anticipated. Toshi saw his sidekick adjust his glasses as he spoke, a sign the man was beyond angry but staying in control for the moment, didn't you? Yes, I held back some of the information I uncovered. Toshi didn't see the point in lying. He had worked this idea out the moment Naomasa had started to uncover All for One's finances, although I didn't expect this. Not this amount, but yes, I knew it would be a lot more than you believed. And you knew it would be enough to force All for One's hand. And you knew I would say we're not ready. Mirai felt himself losing control as he readjusted his glasses again, feeling his heart starting to beat faster. You want him to try and kill you? But we aren't ready. This wasn't the plan. We still have a dozen villains we are tracking and you haven't even looked at a sucesso dash. I am not passing it on. Toshinori's words cut clean through Mirai's anger as he felt himself go even paler. I am going to face him with one for all and I am going to end this. Toshi. Mirai just opened and closed his mouth, not sure what words if any could come to him. But why not tell me? We could have planned this Toj dash. Because this needs to end. I feel it inside of me. I have never felt this strong. I am at my peak and I can this end but only if I face him now. Toshinori pushed himself from the desk he was leaning on and stood in front of his friend. And I know you wouldn't agree. I know you would have pushed back, convinced me to stay the course, chip away, keep the public safe, find a successor, train them and then fight him. Yes, because that has been the plan and it will work. Mirai moved forward closer to his idol and friend, meeting his eye, hoping he could still get him off this path he had set himself on. It won't. Toshinori winced as he snapped at his friend, releasing a sigh before placing a hand on Mirai's shoulder. It won't. All for One has hunted down every other wielder of this power except for me. Why? Because he's afraid. Mirai felt his heart sink as he could see what All Might's plan was and he hated that his friend was right. He's afraid that you can beat him. Yes, which is why we will never be able to face him on our terms. Toshinori pushed, squeezing his friend's shoulder a little as he leaned over a little to look his friend in the eye, who now trying to avoid his gaze. I might be able to beat him right now, but in a year? In 5? In 10? After I pass on One for All? I don't know. All for One has time on his side. He was going to avoid confronting me until he was sure he would win. So you forced his hand. Mirai released a sigh as he raised his head and met his friend's warm gaze. Forced him into a situation where he had to confront you or else lose control of everything he built. Toshi just gave a nod to his friend as he released his shoulder before standing back up to his full height and allowing one for all to flow through him, causing his muscle form to appear. Night Eye couldn't help but smile as he saw All Might's beaming smile lighting up the room as he outstretched a fist towards his sidekick, who could feel the power and energy coursing through it. And when he does come for me, I promise you with this fist, I will finish it and create a world where everyone can smile. Mirai didn't say a word, just met All Might's beaming powerful smile with a tender small one of his own, as he fought back the worry bounding in his chest. Even without foresight, he could see what was going to happen next. All for one would feel his grip on the underworld starting to slip as All Might pressed his advantage from today. The monster would send whoever he had left to spare to try and soften up All Might, and then All Might would be drawn or lured somewhere that All for one could control everything, somewhere out of the way so the monster wouldn't reveal himself to the world, so he could maintain his power in the shadows. Then the two would fight, and only one would walk away. I only hope you're right, Toshi. Mirai felt his smile waver for a second as All Might gave him a nod, turned around to pick up the pad and moved to sit at his desk so they could plan their next move. Because you are risking everything on this one shot. All Might for his part never saw the waver in his friend's smile or the flash of worry on his face as he sat down. His focus for a moment went to the few framed photos on his desk. Each one was a reminder to keep pushing himself forward, to keep going to see this through to the end. One was of Gran Torino and him training together at UA, although that was tucked away in the back. A second was of his mentor, she floating in the air and smiling down at the camera. A third was him and Mirai together on their first public outing as a team. However, as he looked them over, his eyes darted to the top drawer of the desk on his right. He fought the urge to open it as he knew what was in it. That drawer had only one item in it. However, although he resisted the urge to open it and refocused on his sidekick as the two started to talk about what to do next now that the raids had succeeded, he felt another urge echoing in the back of his head. An urge he had felt constantly for years now, but was now thundering in his skull as the end of the road of his mission was starting to loom large on the nearing horizon. He kept it at bay long enough that his conversation had ended with Mirai and the man had left to check on Naomasa before slumping into his seat, his smile falling away. He didn't even notice that his hand had opened the forbidden drawer and removed the slightly dusty framed photo of a couple smiling and laughing with each other at a picnic that seemed lifetimes ago now. This could be it. I should reach out, I should. Toshi fought down the urge with every ounce of strength of will he had in him as he quickly but very carefully put the framed photo of Inko and himself back into the drawer before quickly shutting it. He had to stay focused, he had to remain on task, and he had struck the first blow of what he hoped would be the final battle. He could afford to think about that. I should see her one last time. I should say goodbye. Midoriya apartment, Mizufu, Japan, 5 years ago. Plate. Carry the remainder over to the second column, which should equal the combined revenue from circulation for the second quarter. Inko was hunched over the desk in her room as she put the last pieces of the puzzle together, only to groan in frustration. Only they don't. Most be something in the marketing budget then, as salary and circulation work out. This is going to take forever. Inko lifted her hand and took another slice of cake into her mouth. The rich chocolate goodness soothed her dread of staring at numbers for the rest of the day. She released a sigh and sat up, stretching herself as she did so. The act, however, caused her to frown a little as she looked down at her body. She wasn't self-deluded enough to ignore that she had gained more than a little weight over the past few years and that her somewhat slender figure was a bit more round. The thought caused her to frown and she automatically reached for another slice of cake. However, she withdrew her hand quickly when she saw what she was doing. She knew she should cut back on the comfort food that had become her unhealthy escape from stress and worry, and largely she had been successful. But she knew she should be doing more. What she should do was cut more out of her meals, maybe go on a diet or even join that gym that Mitsuki keeps suggesting. However, just as those thoughts entered her head, they were immediately pushed to one side as a figure appeared in the doorway, who was the source of worry and stress. Mom, where do you want this? Izuku's question was in reference to the 2 large boxes he was struggling to carry. Her eyes couldn't help but glance at the small bruises and scars on his arms. Oh baby, just put them at the foot of my bed, I'll sort them out. Inko stood up and almost rushed into her son to help him, trying to take one of the boxes from him. Mom, I had that. Izuku ummed as he failed to prevent her from taking the top box, but managed to place the second one down before she could grab it. Oh, I know baby, I just… Inko trailed off as she tried not to look at her son with worry again, seeing he felt low that she had helped him again. I just wanted to help. Her eyes darted to his arms again. The bruising and cuts were nothing new, and she felt the urge to grab another slice of cake again. She and everyone else knew Izuku was being bullied at school and that it was only getting worse the older he got. She had done everything to protect her son, talked to teachers constantly, made reports to the school board, gone to the Ministry of Education to complain, and even threatened the school at one point with legal action. All of which had amounted to nothing. She had been politely ignored by the school board, the teachers had given excuses, and anyone official had just never got back to her. Her boy was at the top of his class academically. He was also kind, helpful, and naturally athletic. In another age Izuku would have thrived at school. Although he didn't look like Toshi, Izuku had clearly inherited his father's body type. Each year his physique started to resemble Toshi's a little more. He was the second tallest kid in his class. There was one mutant-type student who was just huge, but Izuku beat everyone else by a good few inches, and despite only turning 9 next month, he was soon going to be taller than her. He had placed second in all of the sports trails for his year, beaten only by Katsuki, and found that he didn't have to try very hard to keep in shape. He was naturally fast, strong, and if someone was willing to help probably would dominate any sport he wanted to pick up. However, none of that mattered because he was quirkless. Anytime Izuku did anything good, it was ignored. Anytime he succeeded, it was mocked that everyone else was being handicapped. Anytime he did anything, it was made a joke. She had tried to be a wall between the harshness of the world and her son, but little by little it had worn her down. She found herself just fighting the same battles every day and getting nowhere. Her Izuku was suffering, but he was putting on a brave face, and she knew he wasn't telling her even a tenth of things that were happening to him at school or afterwards. She had spent a fortune replacing damaged books and clothing. She wished she could do more, but she just couldn't, and it was killing her. I know, Izuku replied, giving his mother a clearly fake smile before he turned and left the room, his shoulders slumping slightly as his voice dropped a little. I know. She opened her mouth to say something, to ask him about his day to lighten the mood, or if that failed, to discuss his birthday that was coming up next month. However, both topics died before she could voice them. The former would just result in him lying to her about whatever had happened, and the latter would lead to awkwardness. When he was little, Izuku's birthday, although never large, had attracted at least a few attendants, principally his old childhood friend Katsuki, but every passing year fewer people attended. A few years ago she had to start coming up with trips for the two of them to go on for his birthday, as not a single person had replied to his invites. So she was just forced to watch her son retreat from her, her heart aching as her mind failed to come up with anything to help him. What made it worse was that he was only turning 10 and the world was already starting to grind him down, and no one apart from her seemed to care. She also knew it was only going to get worse. When he started looking at schools in a few years, his condition was going to limit his options. She was dreading those days, and after that he would be looking at jobs or higher education that she knew from experience would be even more ruthless. When she had been looking at her first job, her very weak quirk had closed a lot of doors, and only her academic skill had made up the difference. The world revolved around quirks. Even if the job you wanted had nothing to do with it, having the right one opened doors. Not having, well, she didn't want to dwell on that. As she left her office wanting a break from work, she quickly spied into her son's room, as he had left the door ajar. He was laid on his bed, that in a few years would be far too small for him, and like always she saw he was writing in one of his notebooks. Izuku's room was largely bare. He had his own desk with a laptop, with the desk's inbuilt shelf stacked with volume after volume of his own handwritten notebooks. She had no doubt if things were a little different he would have plastered it floor to ceiling in hero-worshipping posters, action figures, and other memorabilia. She had never truly relented on her no-hero talk in the apartment, and Izuku had never pushed her on it. But she knew if she opened a drawer of the desk or looked under his bed she would discover a trove of forbidden items. Despite never saying it, she knew that he still dreamed of becoming a pro-hero, of swapping in and saving the day with a smile on his face. Would I let him? Inko froze at the thought as her eyes lingered on her son, who was oblivious to her watching him. She found her hand going to the faded scar on her cheek. If he had a quirk, would I stand in his way? Would I deny him his dream? I saw what that world was like, the real harsh reality of it, the Dan dash. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. Inko for a second thought that the electronic voice of All Might was coming from her son's room, that it was his new ringtone. However, it took all of a few seconds for her to remember Izuku didn't have a cell phone yet and that he hadn't moved at all, so it couldn't be one of his toys that he kept hidden. As All Might's voice kept blurting out, her eyes widened as she realized where it was coming from. She saw Izuku lower his notebook, confusion on his face as he heard the strange ringtone. She moved like lightning as she rushed back into her small room and launched herself at the box under her bed. She had largely forgotten that she had the box, as it was all the stuff from her time working at the Might Tower and with him. She quickly found the cell phone that was making the noise. It had been a gift after the relationship had become serious. She had originally thought the ringtone was a joke about where they worked, so had never bothered to change it. She would have frowned that it still worked, as she hadn't charged it in a decade. Knowing who had got it for her, it was probably some advanced model that didn't need charging or something else complicated. However, she didn't have time to ponder that as Izuku's voice sounded out from her door. "Mom, is everything okay?" Izuku gave her door a knock and a little push, but she again moved like lightning as she pressed herself against the door to prevent him from coming in and seeing both the phone and her box. "Oh yes, sweetie, nothing wrong." Inko managed to sound normal as she muted the phone that was still ringing. "Just watching a video a friend sent." "Okay." Izuku's voice sounded a little wary but accepting nonetheless. "I'll be in my room if you need anything." "Love you." "Love you too," Inko stated back, waiting to hear her son move off before looking back at the phone that was silently buzzing in her hands. She looked at the number but didn't recognize it and was feeling the urge to just let it ring out and then get rid of the phone. It was likely a wrong number anyway, or a scam caller who got the number by dialing randomly. Anyway, she had put this part of her life firmly in the past, far behind. She had moved on. She had a new life, a job, friends, her son. She never thought about it at all, and she didn't need to. "Hello." Inko blinked as she found that she had answered the phone. Pressing it to her ear without thinking, she held her breath, expecting to hear his voice again. "Hello, is this Inko Hikitsuga?" The voice caused Inko to blink. It was a woman. Her tone was polite and respectful. Speaking." Inko shifted as she moved further into her bedroom, finding it odd being called by her old name, and had no idea who the woman was. "Sorry, who is this?" "My name is Aiko. I'm calling from Hiringu Private Hospital in Tokyo. We apologize for the abrupt call, but you are listed as the emergency contact for Toshinori Yagi." The woman's tone was respectful but laced with a hint of somberness that caused Inko to feel her heart drop as a chill went up her spine. "We are sorry to inform you that he has been admitted with multiple severe injuries and is currently in a critical condition. As per private instructions in his medical records, we are contacting you to let you know." Inko felt her brain stop working for a few seconds as her mind tried to catch up with what she was being told, all of which made no sense. "What do you mean critical condition? Is he going to be all right? What injuries? Emergency contact?" Inko's mind threw up the question as she started to catch up with the first piece of news that shocked her system, but one she could guess the answer to. He never got around to changing it. "Oh God, I think he is still down as mine. Mr. Yagi is undergoing multiple surgeries by the best doctors available. We even have several pro heroes with healing quirks who have offered their assistance." Inko felt herself collapse as the woman spoke, knowing that the woman was trying to be positive before delivering something awful. "However, I must be honest with you, his condition is not great. His respiratory system is severely damaged and his stomach is not ideal either. He isn't expected to survive the night. If you want to see him, I would advise coming as soon as possible." Inko felt her heart freeze at the words, her mind conjuring up a nightmare she had for a while after she figured out Toshi was All Might that had played out exactly like this. However, there was no waking moment to discover it was all in her head and that he was next to her in bed, no comforting smile or slide of the cheek to banish her fears. She sat in silence for a few moments, not saying a word, as she took in the news that although had once been her greatest fear, she had never truly believed for a second would happen. Toshi was all might, for heaven's sake. He was unstoppable, unbeatable, he was invincible, but he's not, he never was, you know that. The woman on the phone didn't say a word or try to push for any type of response and just waited for Inko to be ready. "I'll be there as swiftly as I can." Inko blinked as she found herself saying the words that her head hadn't actually agreed to yet, but a deep corner of her heart had thrown out before it could be stopped. "Do I have to, bring anything?" "No ma'am, I'm sending you a text to the number we called. It has our address. When you arrive, just ask for Mr. Yagi's room. Any issues, just show them the text message. It will have an ID code at the end. Again, we are very sorry for the news and wish you all the best." Inko found herself moving on autopilot. She waited for the text before she became a blur of motion, leaving her room, grabbing her purse and a coat, and getting a very Izuku ready and out of the apartment. As they exited their apartment block and suddenly stopped, her nearly 10-year-old son just gave her a little worried look as she just stared at him, not moving. Her mind had just caught up with everything and she suddenly realized she hadn't actually decided what to do with her son. "Do I take him with me?" That would mean telling him? Tell him what though? His father isn't overseas but in a hospital in Tokoyo, only a few hours away. Then what? Tell him who his father really is. Inko put an awkward smile on her face as she looked at Izuku, who just shifted and gave his own awkward smile back. "No, no, no, can't do that, not yet. What if this turns out to be a mistake? Or Toshi isn't that hurt? Or Izuku..." Inko knew she had to decide something quickly or her incredibly smart boy would start asking questions, and she wasn't sure she wouldn't just blurt out answers she wasn't ready to give. "You're going to stay over at the Bakugos for a little while. There's been an incident with a family member, a distant one. I just need to go see them is all." "A family member?" Izuku asked, his brow furrowing, as apart from his mother, he had never met or heard of any other relatives apart from his dad who worked overseas. "Are they all right?" "Oh yeah, they're fine. It's a cousin of mine." She took his hand as she answered and started to walk in the direction of the bus stop so she could drop him off with Mitsuki and her husband. "Just need to go see them. It's just there in Tokyo, so I might be a little late coming back." Izuku seemed to frown a little at her answer, but thankfully he didn't press her for any more details and just accepted the story. It took them less than an hour to reach the Bakugo's house. Luckily, Inko managed to call ahead when they were on the bus, so it seemed a little more planned when Mitsuki and her husband greeted them at the door. Izuku gave them a very polite bow and only winced a little when his old playmate Katsuki just huffed at having him stay over but said nothing. Clearly his mother had already laid into him not to make a scene. Mitsuki's husband Masaru took Izuku into the house after he gave his mom a hug to get settled, leaving the two women alone for a moment. "Inko, what's happening?" Mitsuki's eyes followed Izuku until he was out of earshot before asking the question, knowing something had to be very wrong for her to just drop her son on them. "That it's Izuku's father," Inko replied, her friend's eyes widening at the statement. Mitsuki, despite knowing the most out of everyone about Izuku's parentage, still basically knew nothing apart from vague statements she made over the years. "He's in hospital. It's apparently bad." "Oh God, does Izuku know?" Mitsuki shifted, asking the question knowing this was a very delicate topic for her friend. "No, I want to see him first, and if it is..." Inko felt her heart drop again as her mind was just conjuring up the worst possible scenarios. She found she just couldn't a sentence at the moment. "Could I ask, if it turns out to be bad, could you? You just text or call me, I'll bring him up." Mitsuki answered the non-asked question without hesitation. "Thank you, I'll call when I know more." Inko gave her friend a hug, which normally the fiery woman would complain about but for once didn't push the issue. Inko just took a deep breath and gave one last glance at Izuku over her friend's shoulder before turning around and heading out to face complete uncertainty. She was fidgeting every few seconds as she fought the urge to eat something as her mind summoned up all the scenarios it could. However, mostly she just prayed to anyone and anything that would listen that her tea, that Toshi was fine and this was all just a mistake. Hiringu Private Hospital, Tokyo, Japan, 5 years ago, late June. It wasn't. Inko was as still as a stone statue as she looked down at the still unconscious muscled blonde figure on the bed before her. She said figure because what was before her hardly looked like a person, let alone a man, or even remotely like Toshi. There were more wires, tubes and machines hooked up to him than she thought possible, nearly all of them going into his left side, which looked more like a crater than anything close to a human torso. That wasn't even mentioning the bandages. He was covered in so many that he looked like he was being mummified for burial. The only visual sign it was Toshi was that his face was uncovered. However, that appeared to be only a result of necessity, as a breathing tube and mask were fixed over his face. She reached out a hand to touch him but stopped herself just as she was about to slide his forehead, remembering that the doctor had told her not to disturb him in any way. Instead, she just lowered her hand back down to her side, her eyes taking in the sight that so matched the nightmares and fears she had had for years. For a second, her mind flashed an image of not Toshi before her but Izuku, battered, bloody, dying. She shook that image away quickly, focusing on the fact that Izuku was quirkless. For all the harm it did him, at least kept him from this fate. She just refocused on Toshi. She wished the room was silent so that she could think clearer, but every device he was hooked up to made a different sound. That wasn't including the beeping monitors, each one tracking a different part of Toshi's crumbling anatomy. She wasn't sure how long she stood there looking at the man who still conjured up powerful feelings inside her despite all her efforts. She just watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, the only indication she truly had that the machines were indeed keeping him alive. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear, I didn't think anyone was in here." Inko blinked as she turned to see a very short elderly woman with gray hair styled into a netted bun with a large syringe poking diagonally out of it to the left. "I just need to check on his vitals. Don't mind me at all." The woman was clearly a pro-hero given the costume she was wearing. It constituted of a doctor's lab coat and a dress with yellow and red vest-like designs on either side, 2 yellow buttons, and a belt with a pink, R-shaped buckle. She wore bright pink boots and had a helmet around the sides of her head, with a purple-tinted visor joining it over her eyes. In addition, she was walking with a cane designed like a syringe that she was evidently supporting herself on. The woman was a consummate professional. She didn't glance at Inko, ask who she was, and just got on with her job. She double-checked every single monitor and device. As she pulled out a pad from her coat pocket and started typing down the results, her face revealed nothing to Inko about Toshi's state. She just watched the woman work, thankful she finally had something else to focus on other than Toshi's complete lack of movement or sign of life. Is he going to live? Inko finally whispered the question as the elderly pro-hero finished her last check on her patient. "Yes, he's going to live," the woman replied, giving Inko a warm smile, although afterwards, she released a sigh, clearly indicating that his survival was going to be complicated. "He's far too stubborn to die, far too stubborn. Although what state he will be in I cannot say. His body has taken a lot of damage. When will he whack dash?" Inko edged a little closer to the bed, still resisting the urge to touch Toshi but feeling a weight lifting off her chest at the news he would survive. "What are you doing here?" Inko froze as the harsh, cold, blunt voice cut her off, as she turned to see Toshi's sidekick Sir Night-Eye present. "Really, Mirai, is that any way to behave in a hospital or speak to a lady?" The woman stepped forward before Inko could say anything to defend herself. The woman wielded her syringe cane as if she was going to smack him. "It's all right, I get that me being here is a shock." Inko spoke up before Mirai could say anything himself, her eyes darting from him to the elderly pro-hero. "Could you leave us alone for a few moments, please?" "Very well." The woman just gave her a little nod before shuffling her way to the door. As she passed Night-Eye, she whispered something Inko didn't manage to hear. "Don't do anything stupid, Mirai." The two just stood in silence for a few moments as Mirai looked from Inko to Toshinori, his usually stoic features cracking as concern and worry flashed across his face as he looked at his injured friend. However, although the concern didn't leave his eyes, his face fell into a frown as he looked back at Inko, his eyes raking over her. She had changed in the decade since he last saw her. She had gained weight, and she looked more than a little rundown, but she was undeniably Inko Hikitsuga. Her emerald green eyes and hair were unmistakable. The two looked at each other as Mirai moved fully into the room, so he was standing next to her by Toshinori's bed. The pro-hero sidekick was the first to break the silence. What are you doing here, Inko? Mirai's voice wasn't quiet accusatory, but neither was it anywhere close to friendly. I'm apparently still his emergency contact. Toshi never changed them. Inko's words caused Myra's frown to deepen, his eyes narrowing at her, but as he glanced at Toshi again it was clear he believed her. When he was admitted, it was in his files to call me. What happened? The villain, the one who sent those goons that night. Toshi finally managed to flush him out into the open. Mirai just sighed as he brought a hand up to his eyes, rubbing them at the less than ideal situation his friend had created. The idiot knew it was a trap and walked right into it. He won though. What? Won. Inko couldn't help herself as she felt rage and anger build up at the stupid priority that engulfed heroes, the selfless sacrifice that Toshi embodied, the very thing that had driven her away. He's in a coma with half his chest gone. You call that winning? I know. Mirai snapped back, his own rage bursting out, but his anger was clearly not about Inko or her statement as he glanced at his injured friend again. I know, but he's alive and with time can live a mostly normal life now after he retires. Retires? Inko said the word, her eyes widening as she glanced at Toshi herself, her eyes raking over his shattered body. Retired, the word caused an intrusion of images racing through her head. Toshi meeting Izuku, the of them two talking again, her helping and looking after him, the three of them living together out of the limelight now that the world wasn't obsessed with him, now that he didn't have to. He won't, Inko whispered the response, her eyes just staying on the man that her heart still ached for, knowing the truth. Of course he will, he can't continue like this, Mirai replied a little too quickly as he shifted a little as she looked at him, his own concern flashing across his face. He will, it's who he is. Inko closed her eyes as she felt her heart sink again, knowing what Toshi would do, her mind echoing what her heart was feeling. It's why we love him, it's why we couldn't stay. You could stay. Mirai's words caused her to blink as she looked up at the man whose eyes were still fixed on his injured friend before turning to her in almost pleading look there. If we could convince him together. Gran Tranio is here too, the three of us could convince him to use foresight. Inko's voice was suddenly hard and firm as she looked away from Mirai, turning to face Toshinori fully. What? Mirai felt a shiver go down his spine as he knew exactly why she had said those words. I know what your quirk is, I know you can see the future. Inko just stayed looking at Toshi, her heart was beating faster and faster in her chest, however. I know it's never wrong, so use it, see what he will do and tell me there is still hope. Mirai didn't say a word as he looked at her and then to his friend. His mind was racing as he felt everything all at once. His fear of using his quirk in case it created a fixed future, the uncertainty of the future itself in this moment, the worry for his friend's life, and how the world would react to All Might's retirement. All of it hit him at once, but he didn't show any of it as he moved forward. He placed a gentle hand on his friend's exposed hand that wasn't bandaged. The act caused All Might's eyes to flutter open just enough so he could use his quirk, hoping to see a brighter future than the one he feared. It only took moments for Inko to receive her answer. As Mirai's face just grew paler and paler, she saw a tear rolling down his face before suddenly he ripped his hand away, breaking the connection his quirk needed. The sidekick's face was one of pure horror and terror as he almost hyperventilated right in front of her. His eyes lingered on Toshi for another second before they moved and met hers. The look present told her everything she needed to know. That we can change it though, we have to. Mirai's voice for the first time was just broken and lacked all confidence, hope, or resolve as he pleaded with her, I can't let him die. Inko didn't respond to him, she just turned to Toshinori. Although her face didn't show it, her heart was again tearing itself apart. Her angle meant that Mirai couldn't see the tears she was forcing away. She just leaned down and planted a single kiss on his forehead, the only thing she found she could do. As she stood up, she took a deep breath before turning and leaving the room. She hated herself at this moment, but she knew she had to leave. Toshi would never change. He could never change, and he would run headfirst into danger until it killed him. It was why she loved him, and she would stay with him up until the end, but she and Izuku wouldn't change that. In fact, learning he had a kid would probably just make Toshi work 10,000% times harder to make the world safer for him. She wasn't the priority in her life anymore. That spot belonged to her boy and she would be damned if she let him watch his father kill himself. Possibly inspire the boy who is just as selfless as Toshi to risk his own life trying to follow his footsteps. He didn't even have a quirk. If her Izuku learned any of this, he would just get himself killed following the path she had just seen the end of. No, she would be a wreck entirely and hate herself forever, but she would keep her distance and keep her son safe. As she left, Mirai just collapsed onto the floor, his head in his hands as he tried to think of a way to change the future. Both of them missed Toshi's semi-conscious mumble as he fought to live. Inko. Aldred Jr. Hi, Mizufu, Japan, early April. Izuku was sat in his usual corner of his classroom, his head lodged into his latest notebook, his hands scribbling like mad as he made notes on both the heroes he had observed this morning on his way to school. Any lady was interesting, her size-altering quirk made her very visible, good at dealing with large-scale issues and handy in combat. However, it didn't look like her quirk let her scale the size she changed into or only affect certain body parts, which meant that she would be very restricted in an urban setting unless she wanted to cause a lot of collateral damage. Kamui Woods, on the other hand, had a very versatile quirk that Izuku had seen a couple of times before on TV, but being able to observe it in person was so much better. He wondered if the pro was able to. Okay, listen up, class. As third years, it's time to start seriously thinking about your futures and what you want to do with your lives. The teacher's voice forced Izuku back to reality and the classroom at large, where his peers were all grinning at each other, well, all except for one. So I'm going to pass out some career aptitude test. Oh, why bother? You all going to apply for the hero courses anyway, right? The classroom exploded into cheers and shouts as everyone apart from Izuku and one other person used their quirks. His eyes darted to the sole point of calm in the storm of eager children all desiring to become heroes. The sole point of calm was, of course, Kaken. Katsuki Bakugo was sat seemingly bored beyond belief at the lessons he was being forced to sit through. He had his feet up on the desk and was tilting back in his chair. Yes, you've all got some impressive quirks. The teacher waved his class down half-heartedly before raising his voice just a little to get his point across. But no power usage in school. So knock it off. Hey teach, don't lump me in with these losers. I'm the real deal. Izuku fought back the urge to sigh as Kaken smugly belittled the class, confident of his own position. These idiots will be lucky to be a sidekick to some busted D-lister. Izuku just put his head back down and continued on with his notes, ignoring the now routine scene that played out whenever heroes, future careers, or anything position-wise came up. Something would arise, Kaken would proclaim his greatness, the class would react negatively, Kaken would challenge everyone to a fight, and then the teacher would step in to defuse it, but not without mentioning Kaken's high test results and powerful quirk, which just led to the continued cycle of feeding Kaken's ego, which year after year just got bigger and bigger. Izuku's darted back to the scene playing out as his old childhood friend jumped out of his seat, pivoting with a grace that surprised everyone and landing on his desk. The cause of his abrupt movement was that their teacher revealed that he had applied for UA Japan's top hero school, which had only a 0.2% acceptance rate. Izuku's urge to sigh returned as Kaken, now standing on his desk, proceeded to explain why he and only he were worthy of UA and that everyone else was just an extra, that his path to greatness started with UA. Oh yeah, Midoriya, you've applied for UA as well, right? The teacher just glanced up from his clipboard, having long ago gotten used to Bakugo's outbursts. Izuku froze as he felt himself tense, his eyes darting from the back of Kaken's head, who had frozen, to the rest of the class. There was a moment of silence before the entire room exploded in laughter and jeering taunts. Most were what he was used to, how he was a nerd and quirkless without a hope of success. He would have said something, tried to defend himself, and explained UA had dropped the quirk requirement for applying to the hero course, but he knew it would do no good. He could only sit there as he felt his stomach drop as everyone laughed at his goal, including the teacher, who tried to hide his own laugh behind a pretend cough. Well, nearly everyone. Izuku's eyes focused on the one figure who was not laughing but instead just glared at him before moving towards him, his right palm already sparking. Boom. Izuku watched the top of his desk crack apart as he was blasted out of his chair and knocked to the ground. His position in the corner of the room meant he was trapped with nowhere to go. In days gone by, Kaken threatening him would have looked comical, as despite both getting taller with age, Kaken was only 5 feet 8 inches in height, whilst Izuku had rocketed over the last year and was just a little over 6 feet 1 inch now. However, those days were long, and Kaken standing over his prone form whilst sparking his hands created a scene far from comical. His eyes darted past Kaken, hoping for any type of help or intervention from anyone, but like always he was left abandoned to the mercy of Kaken. "Listen up, Deku." Kaken's face was so angry that if looks could kill, then Izuku would already be dead and buried. "You're even worse than these pathetic reject extras. You are a quirkless wannabe. You really think they'd let someone like in when they could have me? You've got it all wrong, Kaken. I'm not trying to compete with you, honest." Izuku managed to get the words out as he shuffled backwards, knowing that if Kaken thought he was trying to compete, it would just get worse. "It's just that I've wanted to be a hero since I was little. I may not have a quirk, but I can still try my best, right?" Izuku gave a small smile, hoping to reach the old ember of friendship that he knew still existed in Kaken and he sometimes saw. Kaken might be a bully and harass him relentlessly, but Izuku never missed that no one else in school came near him, no one else tried to pick on him, and he suspected that Kaken had something to do with that. When they first got to middle school, there was no shortage of people trying to beat him up, steal what little money he had, or just make fun of him, but one day Kaken had insulted him, called him weak, and then suddenly all the other bullying had stopped. Now he wasn't excusing even a tenth of what Kaken had done to him over the years, and Kaken's bullying had got unbearable over the last year, but he knew somewhere deep inside him his old friend was still there and could be reached. "Izuku, get this through your thick quirkless skull. You are never ever going to be able to hang with the best of the best." Kaken's glare softened only for a second before he let off another explosion that shoved Izuku into the wall, his glare returning with a vengeance, ending his hope that Kaken would go easy. "You die in the exams. Defenseless Izuku, this school is already crappy. Do you want to embarrass it more by failing so hard?" Izuku didn't respond beyond glancing away as Kaken stalked back to his own seat, leaving Izuku to pick himself back up and glance down at his uniform to assess the damage. It could have been worse. Kaken's blast had been fairly weak and only singed his tie a little, and he could rub off the marks on his jacket before he got home. With the drama now over, everyone turned back to focus on their teacher, who just carried on as if nothing had happened. His only acknowledgement of Izuku was a glance and shake of his head. Izuku just sighed as he picked up his own chair and desk, setting everything back up as well as he could, and just looked at his cracked desk, trying to figure out what to do for the rest of the day. He just kept his head down and worked around his broken desk like he always did until lunch. He headed straight to the school nurse without needing to be told. It was all routine at this point. When it came to covering up all the incidents involving him, it was the only time the school seemed to put any effort in. His trips to the nurse were to make sure he hadn't broken anything to prevent his mom from kicking off like she always did whenever he got hurt. Although they never did anything to fix the problem, they had got tired of her constant complaints. The nurse checked him over quickly and then sent him on his way to lunch, knowing the school's staff would repair his desk when he had to return to class. The rest of the day followed its usual pattern, more mocking from his classmates, teachers just doing their best to ignore him, and lessons he had already gone over in private. They had gym just after lunch, which had become one of his most conflicting classes. Technically, he placed second out of the entire school behind Kaken, and it was his best class, but the amount of comments and sideways glances he got from both teachers and students about the school handicapping everyone else killed any real joy or pride he got. It only increased his isolation from the other students in his year, leading him to be found either running circles on the school's race circuit or held up in their library. However, there was one advantage to being a social pariah: it left him a lot of time to study. By his own estimation, he was about 4 to 5 months ahead of everyone else. He would have been a lot further along if he hadn't spent about half his time working on his notebooks, but everyone needed to unwind. His mom had her cooking and baking whilst he was analyzing heroes and their quirks. The rest of the day flew past him as he just kept his head down and finished up some sections in his notebook. The school bell ringing caused him to jump a little as he hadn't registered just how late it had gotten. Although school was now over, he didn't move straight away. He just watched as everyone filed out of the classroom. He was always the last one out of the classroom, knowing it was best to avoid the swarm of students at the end of the day. Instead, he just stayed seated and pulled out his phone to see if there was any footage of the incident from this morning. Luckily there was a lot of footage, but nearly all of it was of MT Lady and very little was on her quirk usage. Instead it was mainly on her posing after the battle. He sighed as he kept scrolling through the posted videos. Hopefully someone had posted anything on Kamui Woods. He wanted to see more of the heroes chew. I don't know what you think you're doing, Del. Izuku's head shot up as Kaken snatched his notebook from him. He had been so focused on his phone he had missed that Kaken and 2 others had stayed behind. But we are not done. What you got there? His diary. The question came from one of Bakugo's 2 constant shadows. The boy just gave a brutal chuckle as Bakugo just held up the notebook for his shadows to read. Oh God, don't tell me you're making notes on being a hero? The other boy with Bakugo just shook his head and joined his companion in laughing at Izuku. That's so pathetic. He's so delusional. Izuku had never actually learnt their names, namely because they had never bothered to introduce themselves to him and his only interactions with them was when they backed Bakugo. Izuku quickly pocketed his phone. He kept his low, making sure not to meet Kaken's eye. He just wanted to get whatever this was over quickly. Yeah, I know it's real pathetic. Please just give it B-. Izuku was cut off as Kaken just held the notebook in one hand before slamming his fist into it with the other, activating his quirk as did so. Why did you do that? Izuku's sudden outburst was accompanied by him standing up. The swiftness caused his chair to crash to the floor. The act caught Bakugo's 2 lackeys off guard, and both flinched a little as Izuku's height made him a second tower over them. However, the quickly ended as Bakugo didn't even flinch, instead flicking his wrist to the right, sending the burnt and singed notebook out of the open window. Most first-string heroes show potential early on. People just look at them and know they are destined for greatness. Bakugo's words caused Izuku to look at him. His old ex-friend looked at him impassively, as if talking to him had bored Bakugo. When I'm the only student from this garbage school to get into UA, people will start talking about me like that. They'll know I'm legit, the next big thing. That's not ego talking, I just know I'm that good. Right? No ego there. Izuku's eyes flicked to the boy to Kaken's right who just rolled his eyes at Kaken's declaration, but Kaken either didn't hear or care at his shadow's comment. So, here's some friendly advice. Don't apply or else. Kaken accompanied his words by placing his hand on Izuku's side and letting off a small blast that knocked the taller boy to the floor. Izuku just stayed down even though every fiber of his body was telling him to get up and fight back, but that was when his head took control. If he got up and pushed back, all that would happen is that Bakugo would knock him down again, this time likely worse. He would ruin his clothes even worse, and that would lead to his mom kicking off when she saw him. His mom was already dialed up to an 11, possibly a 12. Since learning he was taking the UA entrance exam, it was best not to add to her already growing stress. I thought you had at least some fight. Izuku didn't look up to see which lackey had made the comment as the boys left the room. This is just pathetic. Nah, he just finally gets it. He'll never be a hero. The other boy laughed as he backed up his friend, both still trailing behind Bakugo. Better to find out now than later, right, Deku? You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there is a way, Deku. Bakugo didn't even look at him as he opened the door, his voice dripping with sarcasm before glancing over his shoulder at the prone Izuku. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the building. Izuku felt his hand tighten into a fist and was about to say something when Bakugo and his lackeys just left, not caring to see the impact of his words. Izuku just waited a few moments before standing up, gathering his few personal items and heading out himself. He didn't go to the buses or stations like the other students, but instead headed to the small garden where the school kept a koi pond. By his estimation, his notebook should be somewhere around here. It didn't take him long to find it floating in the koi pond with a few fish trying to nibble at it. Great, my dreams are reduced to fish food. Come on, that's enough, Izuku sighed as he took the notebook from the fish who swam off. He assessed the damage and just released another sigh. Going to have to transfer everything to a new notebook. Come on, we need to go or I'll miss the BU dash. Screech. He just yet another sigh as he saw the bus doors screeching shut before pulling off, leaving him behind. Guess I'm walking. If I cut through the underpass, I should only be 30 minutes late, 40 at most, Izuku said, just putting the slightly damp and singed notebook in his bag. Mom's going to be so mad. Maybe if I pick up some chocolate on the way home, I can avoid lecture. Underpass, Musuf, Japan, early April. Izuku blinked as he coughed, trying to suck in as much air as possible. The world returned in all of its vast brightness. He remembered cutting through the underpass. He remembered practicing his smile like he always did when having a rough day. Then, oh God, the villain! The sewer cover had flown open, then a green sludge had come out, grabbed hold of him, and then started to force its way into his mouth. He also remembered the sludge talking. It had thanked him mockingly for being the hero that saved it, that his body was the perfect place to hide. The world had started to go dark at that part. He thought that was it, that his life was over, when suddenly someone had arrived to save him. He could have sworn it looked a lot like. "Oh good, you're awake. I was just about to try to wake you." Izuku shot upright, his eyes widening as he took in the giant before him who was pouring the last of the sludge into a bottle. "Apologies, I had to get this one all bottled up." "Ah." Izuku moved backwards, scurrying like a crab until he fell over again as his eyes took in the impossible sight before him. All Might. "Wow. Looks like you're moving just fine. Sorry again, I didn't mean to get you caught up in my justicing." All Might stood proudly, his eyes slightly masked by his burrow as he struck a heroic pose. "Usually I pay more attention to keeping by standard sage. But it turns out this city's sewer system is pretty difficult to navigate. Anyway, you were a big help. Thank you. I've captured the evildoer." All Might let out his signature laugh, lifting his head to let it out fully. However, it was also to cover him, wincing slightly as the pain in his side flared up again. As he lowered his head back, he fought off a frown as he looked at the tall, slightly well-built lad. There was something about him nipping at the back of his head. The boy was just transfixed looking at him, allowing All Might a few moments to examine the boy's features. There was something about the boy's green hair and green eyes that seemed familiar. They almost reminded him of. "Holy CRP. I need to get an autograph." Izuku moved with speed that even surprised All Might, as he started to search his pockets and the ground around him for a pen before settling on his notebook that was next to him. "I've got a pen around here somewhere. Please sign my notebook." He already did. Before All Might could say anything else, the boy had already sprung to his feet and was bowing to him so rapidly that he was afraid he was going to pull something. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." Izuku's mouth moved in its typical a mile a minute fashion as he failed to contain the sheer excitement that was permeating every inch of him. This will be a family treasure passed down for generations to come. Aha. All Might kept his composure as he turned around, getting his bearings before he headed off. "Well, I've got to get this guy to the police. Stay out of trouble. See you around." "Wait, you are leaving already?" Izuku's bowing stopped, standing up straight to look at his hero who was about to depart too soon. He had so many questions he needed to ask. "Yeah, pro-heroes are in a constant battle against time as well as evil, do you know?" All Might started stretching and getting ready to leap away. "Me more so than others." All Might's stretching covered another wince and a slight groan as he felt the now all too common strain. He felt down to his bones. "Damn, I'm about to lose it. Got to get out of here before it happens." "Please stand back." All Might pushed off with a burst of power that he made sure won't knock the boy flat. "Thank you for your continued support." "Ah." All Might's head snapped down as instead of seeing the retreating ground below him as he gained altitude, he was greeted by the green-haired boy clinging to his waist. Hey, what do you think you're doing?" All Might moved his arm down, trying to gently push the boy off of him, but felt the grip on his waist turn vice-like. "I love my fans, but this is too much. Please let go." "No way. We're flying. If I let go now, I'll die." Depth sight screaming it out. Izuku's statement came across very reasonable and logical. "Please, I just need to talk you." "Oh yeah, that's good point." All Might's gentle push turned into a grip as he started to twist and look for an early landing site, spotting one a few blocks coming up. "Keep your eyes and mouth shut. This is going to be rougher than I would like." All Might twisted a little in the air as Izuku followed his instructions so that he could redirect them to the top of building they were fast approaching. As he made the movement to allow them to land, he felt the pain in his side flare up and let out a cough he was thankful that the rushing wind covered. However, he felt the familiar wetness in his mouth as he coughed and couldn't stop the trickle that escaped the corner of his lips. Sheet. All Might cursed in his head as they landed somewhat roughly on the roof, trying to will his form to stay as he felt himself losing his grip. My whole life just flashed before my eyes. Izuku was on his knees still where All Might had gently dropped him when they were safely on the roof. That wasn't a smart move, kid. You should be oof. All Might stood with his back to the boy, his hand going to his mouth at the involuntary cough, his face scowling as he saw blood on his palm. Bang on the door for a while, someone will let you in. I need to go now. Wait, not yet. Just one question. Izuku sprang up and despite looking like he was going to throw up, he moved with remarkable steadiness towards his hero who was trying to leave. No! All Might winced both at his growl at the boy who was just an overly enthusiastic fan and the pain in his side that now felt like it was about to tear open. I don't have the time, sorry. I have to know. Izuku stopped as he felt every insult, every snide remark, every moment of doubt rear itself up inside of him as he looked at his hero. Can I be a hero without a quirk? All Might froze as the question caused a memory that he had almost forgotten to rear to life inside his head. For a second his Emma appeared before him. She did not have the friendly smile he usually recalled plastered on her face. No, it was her when they had first met, her critical eyes assessing him up and down, as he stood before her holding a metal pipe, the hero who just saved his life. He asked a question not too different from the one he had just heard. I'm quirkless, I just a normal kid without any powers. Izuku felt himself tremble as he voiced the doubt that he had kept hidden from everyone and everything in a world that had already determined his value. So I want to ask, could someone like me ever hope to become someone like you? Without a quirk? All Might stopped turning his head slightly to look at the boy who was standing waiting for a response. However, reality crashed straight back into him as he felt his grip finally go sheet. Not here, not now. People don't think I have a chance. That me not have a power makes me a weakling. My classmates, well, everyone actually makes fun of me. Izuku carried on, oblivious to the smoke pillowing off of his hero as he pushed on, gaining confidence to sheer what he had spent a lifetime burying deep down. But that just makes me want to prove them wrong. Since I was little, all I ever wanted to was help people. I wanted to give them a fearless smile and be like, yo, ish. Izuku's scream was long and louder than anything he thought he was able to make, as standing before him was no longer the invincible symbol of peace but a skeleton. The man he was looking at looked more like a corpse than a man. His face was gaunt, his figure hunched over, and his skin looked pale and stretched over his bones that were visible despite the presence of muscle. It was like someone had come along and just sc'd anything resembling life out of the man but somehow left him with the ability to stand. The scene was made worse as the man opened his mouth to say something and all that came out was a strange noise. It was like coughing, pained groaning and spitting combined as blood splattered out of his mouth. What happened to All Might? You deflated. This can't be happening. Izuku was shaking, his whole world was crashing around him as the world's pillar of strength looked at him with deep sunken tired eyes. You're an imposter, a fake, a phony. The real All Might is, he is. I can assure you I am really all me oof. All Might wiped away the blood from his mouth as he let out a sigh, deciding to explain the situation. You know how guys at the pools are always skiing and flexing trying to look buff? I'm like that. This can't be real. No, I've got to be dreaming. Izuku was still shaking as his mind reeled from the revelation before him, although his emotional side refused to accept it. All Might's a giant of a man who saves everyone. He defeats all obstacles and wins the day with a fearless smile. There's plenty of fear behind that smile. All Might sighed as he lowered himself to sit on the floor, needing even this small act of rest. His sigh deepened as an image of someone else with green hair flashed across his mind. Plenty of fear. I counting on you not to spread this, okay? Don't go talking about this online or to your friends. Oh God, Izuku whispered as the man who he was slowly accepting was All Might pulled up his shirt partway and showed a deep gnarled wound. Pretty gross, right? I got this 5 years back. My respiratory system was basically destroyed and my stomach is gone. I went through some intense surgeries. All Might's face fell for a second. He pushed out the memory of the hallucination he was recalling of her standing over him as he clung to life. Even with the best quirk healers in the world, it can't be fixed. They've worn out to the point I can only be All Might for about 3 hours now. The rest of the time I'm like this. No way. Izuku's eyes lingered on the wound, missing the forlorn look All Might had for a few seconds, his eyes only returning to his idols when the shirt was lowered. Wait, 5 years ago, so it was the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? You know your stuff, kid, I'll give you that. All Might chuckled, looking at the boy before glancing away. The boy's memory and green hair were making him recall the one person he was actively trying to forget. He let out another sigh. He hadn't seen her in about a decade and a half, yet the mere memory of her still sent him spinning. He recalled hallucinating her whilst in the hospital. He remembered the drive it gave him to cling to life and how shattered he had been to wake up to find out it had been a dream. No, it wasn't that. The fight that did this the world doesn't know about. I've worked hard to keep it that way. I'm supposed to be the guy always smiling, right? The symbol of peace. People have to think I'm fearless. I'm invincible. Truth is, I smile to hide the fear. Izuku's eyes connected with the world's greatest hero's deep, tired eyes as the man willed himself to look back at the young boy. He paused for a second as he prepared to do his job of protecting someone from danger, and the kid was on the cusp of going down an extremely dangerous path. Although he was loath to crush anyone's dreams, he had seen the world, and the quirkless boy before him would be chewed and spat up trying to achieve something so impossible. It didn't help that the green hair and eyes reminded him of the person he wanted to protect most in the world, the person he wanted furthest from this life. It's just a brave face I put on. This job isn't easy. It will take everything from you and then more. So you have to have strength beyond the ordinary to bear it. All Might steeled himself as he made sure his tone was calm and even. Some villains can't be beaten without that strength, without power. So to answer your question, can you be a hero? Not without a quirk. I see. Izuku felt himself deflate like All Might had before moments ago, as his life truly crashed around him. If you want to help people, there are plenty of ways to do it. All Might looked away from the boy, seeing the hurt in his eyes as he moved towards the door, praying it was open so he could leave swiftly. You could join the police force. They get CRP because heroes capture most of the villains, but it's a fine profession. It's not bad to have dreams, kid, but make sure they are attainable. I made that mistake once myself. All Might was thankful that the door was indeed unlocked, allowing him to leave. As the door shut behind him, he let out a deep sigh and ran a hand through his hair, hating himself more than a little for the tough love he had just dished out. However, he refocused his mind on the task at hand. He needed to get the villain he had bottled up to the police and rest up. He had a meeting at UA tomorrow. Although he now had to make sure the villain he captured was kept in isolation, he no doubt saw All Might's change. They didn't need his condition getting out into the what? Where's the bottle? All Might's hand grazed his pocket and found it was now empty, his eyes widening in panic as he patted down his body and found nothing before a horrible realization came to his head. CRP. It must have dropped it when the kid grabbed onto me. Boom. All Might's head snapped towards the window where in the distance, in the direction he had leapt from, a huge explosion ripped through the air. Smoke and screams rose into the air, causing All Might's heart to sink and his face to pale as before he could think his feet were already rushing him down the stairs and towards the danger. Even in his weaker state, it didn't take long before he reached the site of the villain's attack, his eyes taking in the spreading fires and the heroes desperately trying to save everyone. He saw the green sludge villain he had captured, but this time there was a blonde boy trapped inside the disgusting goo that the monster was made up from. He tried to push himself back into muscle form, but the sharp pain in his side stopped him before he could push himself too far, causing him to nearly keel over. Damn, my time's up. I've got nothing left. I lost focus and dropped him. I was too worried about my time limit, acting like a damn rookie. All Might hand turned into a fist as he heard the crowd watching the fight whispering in worry, many wondering where All Might was. Now look at me, I'm useless, pathetic, some hero I am, I can't do anything to he dash. Hey kid, stop. The pro-hero Death Arm's voice snapped him back into focus as he screamed as someone insanely ran into the burning street, you'll get yourself killed. All Might eyes widened in shock as he saw the green-haired boy rushing forward, dodging around the debris and fire as he moved without concern for his life towards the danger. He blocked out the shouts and murmurs of worries coming from the crowd and heroes, instead just focusing as the boy threw his bag at the villain, hitting him in the face. He let out a small chuckle as the boy's attack worked. Villain reeled back. letting him reach his friend and started to try to claw him free. What the hell you doing? The blonde boy who was trapped managed to shout as his face was temporarily freed as the villain reeled in pain from the blow to his face. I don't know. My body just moved. All Might felt his body tense as he started to push past the unbearable pain as he heard the boy's pain. Come on, I need to get you out of here. I am done playing die, you brat. Izuku found himself knocked down as the sludge villain landed a blow and lifted up an arm ready to bring it down to crush him. He flinched as he saw it start to descend, but before he could even close his eyes to brace for the end, he saw the arm stop and the world freeze. The villain, Kaken, the heroes, the crowd, even the roaring fire seemed to freeze in place. All Might had arrived. I really am pathetic. All Might was struggling a little to hold the sludge villain in place, his smile strained as he looked down at Izuku, who just gazed up at him in wonder. I told you the traits that make a great hero, but I see now that I wasn't living up to my own ideals. Pros are always risking their lives. That's the test of a true hero. All Might moved swifter than the eye as with his free hand grabbed onto Kaken, pulling him out in one swift motion. At the same time, the number one hero freed his other hand, shattering the villain's arm in the process as he turned on his heel slightly to pull his now free arm back, ready for a powerful blow. Detroit smash. Izuku's eyes just absorbed the sight as All Might's punch was so intense that it not only created a gust of wind that blew the sludge villain apart but created a vortex so intense the weather itself changed. However, he drowned out the sudden cheers from the crowd, he ignored the heroes that rushed in to help, and he didn't even glance at Kaken, who was transfixed on All Might. No, his eyes stayed on one thing. All Might's hand that he had raised into the sky in triumphant was shaking. It was so slight and he could only see it because he was right next to the hero, but he saw it. The world's greatest hero was in pain, but he kept on smiling. Several hours later, back alleys. Izuku was walking home. Well, it was more of a trudge really. His mood had not truly improved, in fact it had gotten worse. After All Might had saved them and the villain was captured, the world returned to its usual status, namely Kaken was praised whilst he received nothing but criticism. The heroes had laid into him for being stupid and reckless whilst they had told Kaken that he should be proud that he held on for as long as he did. Luckily the media focused more on All Might and Kaken than him. Apparently a quirkless boy trying to save his friend wasn't newsworthy. Well, at least it had stopped Kaken from dash. Izuku stopped as Kaken suddenly appeared from around a corner, slightly out of breath. Izuku didn't say anything as his classmate caught up to him, his face fixed in an unusual scowl. Listen, I wanted to say, look, I would never ask for help from a weakling like you. Don't think you can look down on me, okay? I was fine by myself. So, you didn't help, okay? You did nothing. Izuku didn't even have time to blink before Kaken opened his mouth to say something else before just giving him a glare and turning around, rushing off as quickly as he came. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head at Kaken's near meltdown over him trying to help before sighing and continuing back home. Time to get back to giving up on dream. Kaken is right, it's not like I really did anything to help, but at least I tried. Izuku's face formed a worried frown as he looked at his phone and saw just how late he was. Mom is going to kill me, and if she caught me on the news, oh god, I'm so grounded for Ev dash. I am here. All Might appeared in front of him, his hulking muscle form casting a shadow over the young boy. All Might. Izuku's shock was evident as he started to glance around but saw that no one was nearby, even Kaken had disappeared from view. How did you find me? How did you get away from the reporters? I stand for justice, not sound bites. And I found All Might suddenly coughed up blood as his muscle form evaporated, leaving him the walking skeleton again. Ah, damn it, sorry kid. I found you by tracing the route you would take to get home. I got your name from the police and had a friend get your address, then worked from there. Okay, Izuku responded, shifting a little as All Might's piercing blue eyes just looked at him. All Might had done more than just get his detective friend Tsukachi to look into the boy's home address. He had him do a quick but comprehensive background check on the boy. It all came back how All Might thought it would and painted an unfortunate picture. He was the child of a single mother, who had a very low income and struggled to pay her bills every month. The boy had no registered father, and from what Tsukachi had gleaned, he was likely either a result of a one-night stand or an affair his mother was running from. The boy's academic and physical scores were exceptional as well. If he had been born in another era where what quirk you had didn't matter, his future would have been very bright. However, currently, from what Tsukachi could tell, all Izuku was destined for was some middling job whilst the world passed him by, pitting him at best for being quirkless and at worst. He hadn't pressed for details once he had gotten the general idea, and Tsukachi had made sure this wasn't some elaborate scheme by All for One. No, he didn't want to know specifics like Izuku's mother's name or anything else of the sort. He had made his decision, and it was going to be hard enough without adding a worried mother to his conscience. If he started to think about that side of things, he would never be able to pass along his power. Although there was something at the back of his head, Izuku's surname was ringing a distant bell in his head, but he shoved that thought away. I came here to thank you and apologize. Also, to discuss your question from earlier. Toshinori shifted as he looked at the young boy before him. Something deep inside him flickered as he looked at the young man. If you hadn't told me about your life, about your dream, I would have just stood by and watched today. So thank you. No, please, it was my fault to begin with. Izuku bowed his head, feeling shame well up in him as his childish dream almost cost people their lives. I got in the way of your work. Besides, you would have jumped in your all me. All might have. The truth is, I was starting to care more about keeping this power going than what I was doing with it. Toshinori took a moment as he looked at his hand that clenched then unclenched before looking back to Izuku. Then I saw this timid quirkless boy into danger. With regard to himself, it inspired me to act. There are stories about every hero, young Midoriya, how they became great. Do you know what most have in common? Izuku just shook his head as he just stayed still like a statue as the world's greatest hero gave him his full undivided attention. He felt himself trembling as All Might's next words hit him fully as he raised his hand out towards him. Their bodies moved before they could think. They threw themselves in danger without regard to their own safety. All Might's hit him so hard that Izuku felt himself drop to his knees as he fought back the urge to cry. And today that's what happened to you. So to answer your question, you too can become a hero. That is why I have deemed you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. I can do this, I can really do this, I can become... Wait, what the hell did he just say? Izuku's mind went blank as he just stared up at All Might in complete confusion. What do you mean, inherit? Inherit what? Izuku was now completely lost, his mind a raging sea of emotions as his dreams seemed to be coming true whilst the world's greatest hero made no sense. You should see your face. All Might let out his deep booming laugh that somehow he was still able to make in his weakened state. Don't worry, I'm not going to force this on you. Okay, listen well, young man. This is your choice. Do you want to accept my awesome power or not? Sorry, I'm very lost. Izuku gave All Might a pleading look as he tried to figure out what the hell the pro-hero was on about. Okay, my abilities come with a few things you need to understand. Most people think my quirk is super strength or some kind of invincibility. Whenever I'm asked, I make a joke about it. People need to think their symbol of peace is a natural-born hero. But I'm not. Nothing natural about my abilities. I wasn't born with this power, inherited it from my scared torch passed on to light the darkness. Someone gave you this quirk? Izuku's confusion both diminished and decreased at the same time as his mind kicked into overdrive, as he started to go full ramble, but that would change everything we know about quirks forever. That would mean they go beyond normal physical parameters. Toshinori just watched as the kid kept talking faster and faster, his sentences becoming mumbled blurs as he didn't even pause to take a breath. He just waited for the kid to run out of steam. This was a lot to take in, so giving him a few seconds to adjust was the least he could do. However, a few seconds turned into a full minute, at which point All Might coughed trying to get his attention, but the boy just kept going. Hey, stop it, you're freaking me out. All Might's shout broke Izuku from his haze. Toshi just sighed as he wiped blood from his mouth. You're focusing way too much on this inheriting thing. Just accept it, okay? I can transfer my power. Okay? Izuku just nodded, not trusting his mouth not to go on another full-blown rant if he tried to speak again. Alright, that's just one thing my powers can do. The true name of my power is One for All. All Might watched as Izuku mouthed the words, giving the boy his best confident look. One person improves this power and then passes it on. It continues to grow each time it's passed along. It is this cultivated power that allowed me to become the world's symbol of peace. The truth behind my strength. But why would you choose to give me a gift like that? Izuku shook a little, his mind filling with doubt that All Might, like everyone else in his life, apart from his mom, would pull away because he was quirkless. What if I can't live up to it? I was on a long search for a worthy successor. Then I watched you jump into danger whilst everyone else just stood idly by. All Might stood as tall as his current form would let him as he looked Izuku straight in his watering eyes. You may be a quirkless fanboy, but you tried to save that kid. You acted like a true hero. So what is your answer? Izuku wiped the tears away that had been threatening to break forth, and he thanked everything in the universe that hadn't happened. He would have been mortified if he had cried in typical Midoriya fashion in front of the world's greatest hero. That certainly wouldn't endear the hero to make the offer he just had. He put on his bravest face possible as he stood up and took charge of his destiny. Yes, of course. I'll do it. Izuku's voice sounded more confident than he thought possible. No reluctance. Toshinori smiled widely at the young boy, seeing a fire ignite inside him. That's exactly how I figured you'd respond. Okay, then let's get started. Takoba Municipal Beach Park, Muzudafu, Japan, mid-August. Toshinori watched as the boy moved the last fridge from the beach, which had been a junkyard only 4 months ago. Izuku's body was dripping with sweat, shaking as his muscles protested merely standing, and he was skiing in air at an alarming rate. However, despite that, Izuku looked good and had far exceeded his expectations. The boy, who had already been in fairly good shape before now, had the physique not too dissimilar from what Toshi's had been at that age. Izuku had pushed himself, and pushed hard, a little too hard at one point, but Toshi had been able to take that excess energy and refocus the young man in the right direction, and it had all paid off. Izuku wasn't bulky or broad-shouldered, but there was no denying he was now lean, muscular, and looked more than a little intimidating when in his workout clothes. The boy's natural height and physique cut an imposing figure, but only when on display in his workout clothes. When Izuku was in ordinary clothes, he somehow turned into the plainest-looking person in the world. He wasn't sure if it was just Izuku's body shape that made his clothes perfectly hide his physique, or if it was just the clothing style Izuku wore. Whatever it was, Toshi found it more than a little amusing to see the different personas the boy could pull off without actively attempting to. One moment, Izuku was a powerful, muscular young man, and doing physical feats that turned heads with a focus and willpower Toshi had never seen equaled in another person. Then all of a sudden he was this awkward, lanky fanboy that muttered constantly, rambled like it was a sport, and looked like a stiff breeze would knock him over. However, as he watched Izuku, who was currently shirtless, expertly lift the fridge onto the back of the truck he had rented and turned to see the now pristine beach, only one thought ran through his head. Izuku was ready, it was time. Young Midoriya, you have done well, more than well. Toshi moved to stand next to the boy, offering him a bottle of water. The young man took it with a thankful nod. I knew you had it in you, but what you have achieved in just 4 months is truly spectacular. Now, it'll still take time for you to be able to handle the full scope of my power, but from what I've seen, I have no doubt you will. All Might. Izuku was shaking a little from the exhaustion as he looked at his free hand. His voice was nervous and more than a little worried. Do I deserve this? Are you sure? You've had to put months of work into me, so much time and effort in helping me. Am I truly the right person? Haha. Toshi exploded into his muscular form, his booming voice echoing over the deserted beach as he smiled at the boy in front of him. Even after all these months, all his achievements, all this training, Izuku was still worried about being worthy, still worried that All Might was choosing the wrong person. While some might see it as apprehension or fear, Toshi had spent enough time with the lad to know that Izuku wasn't scared or frightened. His worry came from a far simpler place. It was humility. Izuku had a humbleness in him that, although Toshi hoped some confidence would curtail a little, he also hoped the lad would never lose. Izuku had a respect for power and ability because, until this very moment, he had never had any. Toshi knew it was a good thing to hold because he held the same respect for the exact same reasons. It was your hard work that achieved all this, not mine. You have achieved this much faster than I thought, which is all the more worthy of praise. Toshi gestured to the now clear beach and the truck piled high with trash as he placed a hand on Izuku's back so he could show the boy his success. For your reward, Izuku Midoriya. Yes, sir. Izuku shot upright, his muscled physique glinting in the sun as he watched his idol and hero prepare to change him forever and fulfill a dream even now he was almost prepared to give up on. Someone very close to me once told me there is a difference between being lucky and deserving. One is an accident, the other is a reward. Never get the two confused. Take that to heart, young man. All Might reached up and plucked a single strand of hair from his head that seemed to glow in the morning light, as he then stretched it out to Izuku. This is not a gift or even a reward, this is something you've earned through your own valiant efforts. This is yours now. Izuku stretched out his hand, which now trembled not in exhaustion but in slight awe as he was about to seize the future All Might was offering. His own mind was racing now as his life up until this point flashed before his eyes, which just made him determined to see this through. His terrible school days, the bullies through his life, Kaken teasing him, the teachers mocking him, everyone telling him to give up were there. But they quickly faded away as his mom took center stage, her gentle smile, her unending fight against impossible odds to help him, her constant show of strength even though Izuku knew how beat down she was, and her warm heart made reach for the future with even greater resolve. This is it, there is no going back, I'm going to do this, I'll be a hero. I'll make my mom proud, I'll keep everyone safe, and I'll keep the world smiling just like All Might does. Okay, just take this strand of hair. Wait, how does this work? Oh God. Did he tell me and I not listen? Will something happen when I take it? Or do I need to do something? How does even passing a quirk war? Eat this. All Might's words caused the world to freeze for a moment as Izuku's hyper-analytical mind just buffered at the statement as a strand of hair was held in front of him. Huh. Izuku would be kicking himself if he was able to think more than just the utter absurdity of what was happening. To inherit my power, you've got to swallow some of my DNA. That's just how it works. All Might rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, remembering when his own mentor had done this and it had been just as awkward. This isn't exactly how I imagined it. Izuku backed away a little, raising his hands up as All Might sighed and moved forward, shaking his head. Are you sure I have to dash? Come on, the quicker you do this, the sooner it's over with. All Might wrapped the younger man in a half hug and lifted up the strand of hair to his mouth, which the young man very, very reluctantly put in his mouth. Eat it, eat it, eat. Oh God. Izuku choked on the hair for a second before drinking what remained of the water and then looked like he was going to be sick, but managed to hold it in. Toshi didn't say anything as Izuku keeled over for a second in discomfort, as a very strange sensation washed over him. He managed to keep from shifting back to his regular form or showing discomfort as the strange sensation just increased. It was like the fire inside his chest, the raging inferno that had been there since he received One for All, was suddenly doused with ice-cold water and was no longer being fed. It was more than that though, there was something beyond that fire, beyond that power that now felt gone, like a presence he had only vaguely been aware of had left him. As he looked at Izuku, he wondered if this was what his mentor had felt. Of course, she had a quirk before gaining this power, so maybe it hadn't been so intense for her. I don't feel any different? Izuku finally spoke up after a few moments of dealing with the revolting act he had just done. Am I supposed to? Ha. All Might's booming laugh took a lot of the tension out of the air and made Izuku relax a little as his hero just smiled at him. Of course not, your body is going to need to process the hair first. It should be about 2 to 3 hours. My stomach's in knots, I think I might need to lie down. Izuku managed to straighten up a little but still clutched his stomach, which was rumbling loudly, but don't worry, I'll be back here in 3 hours to practice with this power. Young Midoriya, listen to me and listen to me carefully. Your powers until you learn control will be dangerous. All Might moved over to the young man, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder and speaking in a tone that grabbed Izuku's complete focus. So I need you to not use your new powers until tomorrow, understand? I need to bring someone to the next training session, in case something happens. I understand, All Might. Izuku gave his idol a nod, and although a part of him was itching to use his new quirk for the first time, he was currently beating it down. I promise I won't. Good, please understand it will be dangerous not just to you but others as well. All Might watched as Izuku's eyes widened at his warning before giving a bow and another promise that he would obey his command. Also, I think it's best if we give you a little time to settle before we do this. Don't want you burning out on the first test drive. Izuku gave a smile as All Might patted him on his back, before the two turned to a brief discussion about what tomorrow would entail. All Might, for once, was vague about the details but just wanted Izuku to meet him at the beach, and then he would take him somewhere that they could practice his new power safely. With that, Izuku rushed off to catch the bus he needed to reach his home and keep his mother from worrying about him. All Might sighed at that as he watched his successor head off. He stayed still for a good while as his mind raced through his plans, as he tried to fight off the worry that tried to creep into his head. Izuku, for obvious reasons, hadn't revealed to anyone what he really was doing during his weekends and days off, especially his single mother. He had just been telling anyone who asked, which was just his mother, that he was training and helping out with a community cleanup project. Toshi still didn't know anything more about Izuku's family than what Naomasa had briefed him on, and in truth, he still didn't want to. He had learned from his MSDR's life and his own disastrous attempt that this only worked if you focused on the work and training and nothing else. If he added in the reality of a single mother to the equation, he would never be able to pass on his quirk. His detective friend had dug very deep into the family and confirmed no connections to crime or All for One. Which is why he was happy to pass on his quirk now. It had only been 4 months, but Izuku's natural athleticism and hard work had combined perfectly with his all-American dream plan to produce spectacular results. Initially, he had estimated Izuku wouldn't be ready until about 6 to 8 months, but the kid had impressed him, and here they were with 6 months to spare. 6 months we can use to focus on honing his body and his quirk usage. Toshi felt a grimace appear on his face as he let go of his muscle form, wiping away a trickle of blood from his mouth. The backlash from One for All can be intense. The kid's ready but still raw. The first run is going to hurt. Please God, let Recovery Girl be okay with this, or we are so screwed. Whilst All Might moved to the truck he had rented to remove the garbage from the beach, pulled out his phone, set it to speaker, and started to make a call, Izuku entered his home. The Midoriya household hadn't changed at all over the years, which was actually a reasonably glaring problem now that Izuku was getting older. The small apartment had only gotten more cramped, and although everything was well maintained, it was clear nothing new had been bought in years, and several items had been repaired instead of replaced. The couch had 2 large stitches on it from where Izuku had accidentally damaged them a few years ago when he got a bit too excited watching All Might on the news. A chair in the kitchen also had a clearly repaired leg, and if one opened up a few drawers, the cutlery had been repaired instead of replaced. Izuku was doing his best to be as quiet as possible. It was approaching midday, and in truth, he was running late. The deal had been that he could go for a morning run on the weekends as long as he was back before one. His mom wasn't at all enthused about his sudden interest in training, and her already DEFCON 1 level of worry had only seemed to increase the closer he got to the UA exam and the more physically fit he became. However, as he tried to tiptoe into the bathroom, he froze as he saw his mother waiting next to the door, her arms crossed and an eyebrow raised at him. "You young man are late." Inko's voice caused Izuku to freeze, although he now stood at a towering 6 feet 1, dwarfing his mother. She still somehow reversed this reality when she took her serious tone with him. "You look like you are going to be sick, and you are filthy, Izuku. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, Mom, everything is fine. The, community cleanup just got a bit intense today, is all." Izuku seemed to avoid looking at her and seemed to be fidgeting like when he was younger and hiding some pro-hero toy he had somehow got. "And I, eat something a bit strong. My stomach should settle down. I promise I'm okay. I'm just going to have a shower." "Wait, I want a dash." Inko just watched as her son disappeared into their very small bathroom at lightning speed, releasing a sigh as she spoke to a closed-door talk. She frowned as she returned to the living room, knowing that Izuku was going to avoid her now for the rest of the day until bedtime. Her son had recently developed the skill of avoiding her any time she wanted to talk about his sudden, intense training regimen. She had been happy to indulge him. When it had been him asking for this unique diet plan he had found and the long park runs he had started with, but now she was growing worried. Although her son clearly didn't think she knew anything about training regimens or diets, she remembered Toshi's lifestyle and her son was going almost as intensely as he used to. She knew the reason as well. The UA entrance exam is only 6 months away, and he's trying to make up for a lack of a quirk. The thought made her sigh with worry as she cast a glance at the bathroom door, that even now she could hear the sound of exercise. He thinks if he trains hard enough, he can make up the difference. He can't. That thought made her reach for a chocolate cookie that was sitting on a plate on the living room table. She wanted to talk to him. In fact, she needed to talk to him about his application to UA, especially this hero course route he was so set on. Her Izuku had already alleviated some of her worries by also applying to the management course, but that had only come about after a very brief chat she had managed to have about a month ago. There was also the fact that when he inevitably failed the practical exam, that if he passed the written exam, he could still be enrolled in UA's general course program, which was still one of the best in the world. Given her son's excellent test results and intelligence, she did not doubt that he would pass the written exam. However, she needed to speak to him because she had also applied to several other schools in the city. It wasn't that she doubted his ability, but she felt that given how tied up his vision of UA was with his dream of becoming a hero, that when the latter finally came to an end, the former would just be a crushing reminder of his failure. She just wanted him to be prepared and know that he had other options besides UA for his future, a future that was constantly on her mind now. She was still showing full support for her son and was helping him any way she could with his dream, but she knew it was impossible and worried she was maybe being too supportive, but she knew why she had. It's what Toshi would do. Inko's face fell as she stared at the plate of chocolate cookies, her appetite and need to eat her worries gone. He was always so hopeful and supportive when we were together. He would have encouraged his son to shoot for the impossible with a wide, proud smile on his face and would have been over the moon that he tried his best, even if he failed. She found herself smiling before suddenly shaking her head at the thought of Izuku's father, who had no earthly idea his son existed or was obsessed with going to his old school. She was just thankful that her baby's dream of following his unknown father's career would soon end, and he could aim for something more realistic. Without a quirk, he had no hope of getting into a hero course, and it wasn't like he would suddenly get one of those, was it? Zen, downtown, Muzutafu, Japan, a week later. Mitsuki Bakugo was more than a little worried as she sat in the booth in the back of one of Muzutafu's nicer bars. Mitsuki knew Zen quite well. It was a popular spot, especially among women. It was the hangout spot for many of her model friends, and she knew other women from work also came here. The main attraction wasn't just the cheap drinks, but that there was always a lack of drunk idiots trying to hit on you. The crowd was always mostly women, and it always had a nice, relaxed vibe. However, right now, all that Mitsuki could think about was that she wished the drinks weren't so cheap as she watched the sea of empty glasses in front of her just grow as the last person on earth she thought of as a drinker got hammered. Inko Midoriya was drunk, scratch that. She was so far past drunk that Mitsuki wasn't even sure if she knew the right word for it. Inko was swaying slightly in her seat as she somehow poured herself another glass of sake from the bottle, finishing it off and draining the glass before she even put the now empty bottle down. As the waitress came over, Mitsuki saw the look of concern on her face and managed to give a subtle shake of her head, preventing the young woman from coming closer, preventing the awkwardness of Inko asking for more and being refused. Mitsuki took a small sip from her own sake glass. She had only had one so far and was both impressed and worried about how many Inko had managed to drink in the short time they had been here. When her best friend had called her up out of the blue and asked if her husband, Masaru, could watch the boys tonight and the two of them go out for a girls' night, she hadn't thought much of it. When the boys had been younger, girls' night had been nearly a weekly thing with the two of them, Mitsuki happy to give her single mother friend a break from worry about her kid. It had fallen off since the boys got older and money got tighter on Inko's end, but with the boys about to take the next big step in their lives, Mitsuki had thought that Inko just wanted a break from that worry and to relive more carefree days. However, as she watched Inko blink, then frown as she tried to pour more sake out of an empty, Mitsuki knew this was more than just wanting to catch up or have a break. Inko is everything all right? She spoke softly as she glanced at the bar, which, although busy, wasn't packed, and the two of them were isolated in their booth. Inko was silent for a moment, apart from a small hiccup she let out as she fell into a deep frown of thought, and when she spoke, it was barely above a whisper but surprisingly articulate. Izuku got his quirk. What? Mitsuki's eyes widened, she leaned forward and gave a glance at the bar. She had lowered her own voice, but wasn't whispering like her friend. But Izuku's quirkless? He's 14 years old and has never shown any sign ever. He's a late bloomer, it's apparently the term for someone like him. Inko slumped back in her seat, her eyes looking at the empty glass that she clearly wished was full now, a grimace on her face. I've looked it up, some quirks don't hit until PBRY or until later in life, depending on what they do. Izuku's quirk just needed time, apparently. My god, Mitsuki slumped back as well, the news hitting her like a ton of bricks. Although Izuku wasn't her biological relation, he was basically her nephew, and she had helped raise him. When did this happen? He came home about a week ago, arm in a sling, a wide grin on his face, and just said, "Mom, I got my quirk." Inko just looked at her friend, letting go of her glass as she leaned forward, her hands going to her face as she tried to deal with the news that was eating her up. He showed me a video of him on a beach using it, when I said he couldn't have, and oh god, my baby's got his quirk. Wait, his arm was in a sling. Why? Mitsuki's eyes shot up as her friend looked like she was about to throw up, and not because of the alcohol she had consumed. The blonde also hadn't missed the latter part of her friend's statement either. He says he needs to learn to focus, channel it better? I don't know, all I know is when he used it the first time, it broke his arm. Inko removed her hands from her face as she lifted her head, and looked so hurt that Mitsuki just wanted to hug her. He said someone with a healing quirk was luckily nearby and patched him up. He said he just needs time to learn control and that. The two sat in silence for a few moments as Inko trailed off as she remembered watching her Izuku smiling at her. He had been so happy, so immensely happy that Inko had cried as she couldn't remember him ever smiling so honestly. That had caused him to hug her, tears in his own eyes as he promised her he would make her proud, be the greatest hero in the world, the person who helped everyone, and that he would support her like she had him. What he hadn't known was that some of her tears weren't joyful, as her eyes hardly left his bruised, healing arm, which caused images to flash in her head. The hospital, wires and tubes sticking out of a mummified body that couldn't breathe on its own, and the look on Sir Nitai's face when he saw what the future would be. A future her son now could have a similar one to. Inko, I know we've never real talked about Izuku's father, but... Mitsuki bit her lip for a second as she tried to word what she was about to say correct. But if Izuku's quirk is dangerous and harming him, maybe you should reach out, get some advice about how he handled it. I can't. Inko looked like she was in physical pain as she rejected her friend's idea. I know you said it was complicated, but this is Izuku's health we are talking about. The blonde model leaned forward, looking at her friend with imploring eyes. Mitsuki, please, I can't go to him. Inko met her friend's gaze with avoidance as she fidgeted uncomfortably, her head starting to pound because of the alcohol. Why? Mitsuki just leaned closer, confusion on her face. She had seen Inko go to any length for Izuku, surely talking to the boy's father. Because Izuku's father is all might okay. Inko exploded, unleashing a pent-up rage and exhaustion that her friend had never known she had. Mitsuki suddenly leaned back, her eyes widening at the declaration. For a moment, she wanted to laugh or raise an eyebrow at her intoxicated friend's statement, chalking it up to a random excuse or just drunkenness, but Inko's reaction stopped her. The smaller green-haired woman's hands shot to her mouth, and she looked terrified as her head snapped to the bar at large sheer terror on her face that someone might have overheard her. Luckily, however, beyond a glance at the sudden shout, no one had paid them any mind or heard what the drunk woman had said. Mitsuki only found her eyes widening even further as Inko's eyes went back to hers, her hands still over her mouth, and a look of sheer panic still present that told Mitsuki all she needed to. "Oh God, you're serious, oh God." She found her voice dropping to a whisper as her brain tried to process the impossible information that she was being given. "Izuku's father is, oh God." "Yes," Inko whispered, lowering her hands, the panic leaving her face only a little as she decided to trust her friend, and it wasn't like she could undo what had just happened. "How?" Mitsuki just leaned forward again, curiosity gripping her, but also concern as she saw how worried Inko was. "I mean, just how?" "It's a long, complicated story," Inko sighed, which turned into a slight hiccup and then a shake of her head as she recalled her old life. "Well, not really complicated, but the short version, I worked at the Might Towers years ago. I met this incredible man, we fell in love, went on dates, and he turned out to be All Might. And I got P-Argent in T. Sheet, like sheet." Mitsuki's mind was still not really computing the facts being laid out before her. All Might was more an idol, a thing than a man. It was like someone saying they had a kid with a mountain. It just didn't make sense. "And he doesn't know, does he?" "No, I had to leave. His life is very complicated and dangerous. I couldn't risk Izuku and then Izuku quirkless. And how do you raise a quirkless boy with the fact that his father's the greatest hero ever? I couldn't expose him to that." Inko wasn't even looking at Mitsuki anymore. Her eyes were on the table as she started to just vent, her mind going full speed at the problem and fear she had been trying to numb with alcohol. "But now, Izuku's developed his quirk, and I don't know what to do. I want to be supportive, but what the hell am I supposed to do? I don't know." Mitsuki just shifted a little. This was all getting a bit beyond her realm of comfort. In truth, it had been the moment Inko had blurted out her deepest secret. "You could reach out, I know it would be awkward, but he's, well, All Might, he's supposed to be super nice, right? He's beyond that, he's so kind. But even if I wanted to talk to him, how the hell am I supposed to do that? I'm an account for a woman's fashion magazine." Inko sighed as she slumped back into her seat. The alcohol in her system was starting to catch up with her. "The last number I have of his is like 15 years old. I don't know anyone in that life who could get a message to him. I can't just call up the tower either. When I worked there, they used to just ignore all the people calling wanting to leave him messages. Anything I come up with would tell someone or lead to someone finding out, and I don't want the world to know about Izuku. It would be dangerous and turn his life upside down." "Okay," Mitsuki nodded, reaching a hand out and placing it over her friend. "If talking isn't an option, then we'll deal with it. Izuku's smart boy and I've had to deal with a dangerous quirk for a decade, so we can figure this out. I know a quirk trainer that you could use." Katsuki the little sheet proved unteachable, but maybe he could help Izuku. "You know I can't afford that." Inko sighed. She had thought about a personal trainer or quirk specialist, but they cost a fortune, even the cheap ones. "I'd have to take a second mortgage on the apartment." That, I'll pay for it." Mitsuki's answer was so immediate and honest that it caused Inko to blink for a second before giving a large smile. "You are one of a kind, Mitsuki, but I can't accept that." Inko turned her hand over, squeezing her friend's hand before they let go of each other. "I will figure something out, or knowing Izuku, he will just suddenly figure it out." Mitsuki just nodded, knowing that it was best just not to push the issue for the moment. Inko had just revealed some very serious personal information to her, which Mitsuki knew the woman probably wouldn't have if she weren't very drunk. Although, to be honest, Mitsuki was surprised at just how well the woman was handling her liquor. Inko was still conscious and still quiet clear, although with the slight swaying she was noticing Inko might not be for much longer. So it was best to leave difficult conversations for the moment, talk when she was more clear-headed and able to think more rationally. Although, a smile did creep on her face. "Sue All Might, huh? Miyagi's gym, Mizuzu, Japan, December." All Might was a rare sight. Not only was he in his true form, but he was trembling a little as he watched his successor being trained. The reason for his trembling was the man doing the training. Sorahiko Torino, better known as Gran Torino, was putting Izuku through his paces. Just watching the man made Toshi's stomach flip. It could remember his own training under the man, every blow, kick and strike to Gran Torino's favorite target that had made him puke more than once. He had initially not wanted to reach out to his mentor, not because he didn't think his mentor wouldn't be helpful, But Gran Torino had retired years ago, and Toshi was loath to disturb the man's well-earned rest. However, he had been forced to reach out since he had run out of ideas regarding Izuku's training. The lad was a fast learner and had worked hard to model his body into a suitable vessel, but for some reason, Izuku's bones kept on breaking every time he used one for all. He had expected it the first time Izuku used the quirk. Toshi had broken several bones in his hands the first few times, but after that, he had no issue. So why is Izuku different? Toshi's mind fixated on the question that he had yet to find an acceptable answer to. Could it be one for all is too strong now? I've had it for decades, and it's certainly stronger than when I got it. Or maybe I rushed this. Izuku is physically strong, but I could have pushed more. So far, the only thing he had managed to teach Izuku was to moderate the amount of power he was using, but it was still causing him to break bones. Recovery Girl had fully stopped coming to their training sessions, both because of her own work schedule and because she refused to let Izuku keep injuring himself on the belief she would just heal him. Which is what had led to the situation before him as Gran Torino plumbed Izuku into the private gym's floor before rocketing up into the ceiling again. Come on, stop playing fanboy and show me something original. Gran Torino smirked as he shot past Izuku, who, even without using his quirk, was doing a good job of avoiding being hit. Remember what we discussed? It's not that special. Focus on the egg and the microwave. Egg and microwave? Toshi felt a bead of sweat form on his head as he let out a deep sigh. Even now, decades later, his old teacher was still eccentric. Maybe I should step in and help. They've been at this for over a day now and it doesn't seem to be improving any. Full cowling 5%. Izuku's shout caused Toshi's eyes to widen as he saw a faint crackle of electricity suddenly appear over the boy's body, and in a flash, he was moving. Toshi could only smile as he watched his student start moving at incredible speeds, rocketing around in an attempt to land a hit on his opponent. Compared to the elder hero, Izuku was still awfully slow, but what he lacked in speed was being compensated by his incredibly analytical mind and the fact that Gran Torino was holding back. Toshi just stayed where he was as he watched the fight unfold, his eyes widening when Izuku managed to scratch Gran Torino's cheek, a fact that Izuku didn't notice as he was slammed into the ground again by Gran Torino's boot hitting his face. The number one hero stayed where he was, even after the fight was finished, watching Izuku scribble furiously in his notebook as he asked Gran Torino's advice and opinion on his technique. Toshi couldn't help but smile at the boy's infectious longing to learn. It's one of the things that constantly convinced him he had made the right call. He watched as Izuku suddenly noticed the time. He was giving Gran Torino a quick bow and a thank you before rushing over to him to do the same. He wanted to speak to the boy about his success in using one for all without breaking anything for once, but that could wait for the moment. As Izuku rocketed out of the door of the private gym they were renting for training, he watched as his mentor walked slowly over to him, the man picking up his cane as he went. Toshinori. Gran Torino's voice was more hoarse than Toshi remembered, but still held the same strength and resolve from when he trained under him. Sir, thank you again for agreeing to help. Toshi gave his old teacher a respectful bow that just earned him a whack on the head. OW. Well, after seeing what a complete shambles of a teacher you are, after only 3 seconds here, you damn right better be thankful. Gran Torino snarled at his former student before releasing a sigh and dropping his fake anger. Honestly, Toshinori, you are too focused sometimes. You need to learn to let go. Let go? Toshi asked, confused as he rubbed his forehead where he had been struck. Knowing he had got lucky in the old days, he would have puked his guts up from a blow to the stomach. Yes, training that boy isn't a battle you need to power into with all your strength or a challenge you need to overcome. It's a journey. Gran Torino just fixed his student with a strong look, which even in Toshi's weakened state looked comical to an outside observer due to the height difference between the two. You need to let go of being that boy's hero and commit yourself to being his teacher. How long can you hold a form for now, anyways? A couple of hours a day, as long as I don't push it too hard. Toshi shifted under his mentor's gaze as he saw the man's eyes narrow at him. I know you can't stay much longer. Do you have any other suggestions? I could really use the help. Gran Torino's face became a grimace as he didn't fail to notice that his student's avoidance of speaking about his limitation but in the end just sighed. So he's applied to UA, yes? Yes, it's the best school to nurture his passion, drive and talent. Toshi's head turned to the door that Izuku had left, a gentle smile appearing on his face. He's also eager to study at my alma mater. He'll be taking the entrance exam in February. If you want Izuku to succeed you as the symbol of peace, I do have one suggestion, Gran Torino. What is it, sir? Toshi's head snapped back to his old teacher, eager to hear what the man had to offer. There are still dangers out there, dangers a young boy isn't ready to face, so a public exam that will display his power isn't perhaps the safest route. Gran Torino started to move, forcing Toshi to walk with the elder hero as he headed to the exit. Have you thought about the other route into UA for Izuku? It would be safer and keep him off the radar until he is more ready. Toshi's face fell into a deep thought as he considered his mentor's words on how to protect the boy who, over the months, had grown on him more than he realized until this moment. There was something about Izuku that kept him in Toshi's thoughts beyond just simple worry over a successor or student. He found himself worrying about Izuku's obsessions, lack of self-confidence, and also how he was doing academically. A part of his brain was always wondering if the boy was safe and healthy. Although, as Toshi thought about it, he didn't really have anything to compare their relationship to, so this might be normal. The only other person he had thought about this way had been. I'll make a few calls. Toshi finally spoke, shaking his head a little to dispel the last image he wanted stuck there for the rest of the day, the image of green hair and emerald eyes he could get lost in. And see if I'm not too late. Toshi, don't be stupid. It was Gran Torino's time to shake his head. You're the symbol of peace and the #1 hero. They would take anyone you said, even if it was literally with a minute to go. UA High School, Mizufu, Japan, late February. Izuku sighed in a deep breath as he stood before the UA gates. He wasn't the only one present. Scores of students were filling into the school that for once was open to the world at large. He had actually been this close before, but last time he had been here, the barrier had been up, and he hadn't seen more than cold metal walls and the school's logo over the entrance. As he moved forward, he looked down at his hand, unclenching and clenching his fist, hoping his limited usage of his new powers would be enough to pass the exam. He wasn't breaking bones anymore, which was excellent, but he was currently maxing out at 8%. As he started to walk forward, only one thought stuck in his head. Would that really be enough to compete with? The best of the best? People like, move it, Deku, or I'll set you on fire. Kaken's snarl caused Izuku to flinch on instinct and slide out of the way as the blonde-haired quirk user. You're such an idiot for doing this. You are just going to hurt yourself. You should pack up and leave now. Good luck. Izuku could think of nothing else as a response as his old childhood friend strode past without a second look. Izuku watched as Kaken's presence caused a murmur of whispers from the other applicants who recognized him from the news months ago. However, Izuku pushed that away for the moment, as he took in another deep breath and started to move forward, ready to seize his destiny and make All Might proud. Or slam my face into the ground. Izuku's mind went into horror as he tripped over his own foot, his distracted mind not making his feet work correctly. However, no pain followed the trip as he suddenly found himself floating just off the ground, his mind going into overdrive to explain what had just happened. Are you okay? Izuku just shot up, right panic on his face, as a girl with a round face talked to him, pushing to the floor before touching her fingertips together. I used my quirk on you. Sorry, I didn't ask, I didn't want you to fall, that would have been bad luck. It's all nerve-wracking, isn't it? Izuku felt himself exit his body for a moment before he remembered All Might's talks to him about confidence and being more present in the moment. Yeah, it is a little. The girl just smiled at him, suppressing a small giggle that the boy, who was 6 foot, spoke so quietly she barely heard him and looked like a baby kitten for a second. Well, I guess I'll see you in there. The girl just gave him a wave. Great, first nice girl I ever met, and I can barely speak. So much for trying to be more confident. Izuku just sighed, thinking he really needed to work on that. All Might had spoken to him repeatedly about it, so it had to be essential for hero work. You are Izuku Midoriya, correct? Izuku stopped as he turned around and was greeted by a blue-eyed woman wearing glasses in a suit, carrying a clipboard. The woman had thick, spiky, dark purple hair, and a beauty mark below her left eye, as well as red-painted nails. Izuku paused for a moment, as although she was dressed like some kind of administrator hired for the day to help, there was something familiar about her. The woman looked at him with piercing eyes, raising an eyebrow, showing she expected an answer immediately. Yes, I am," Izuku replied, looking at the woman with a little wariness and confusion. "Good, please follow me, you're in the wrong place." The woman merely turned on her heels and headed back toward the entrance and road, passing the last stragglers. "Well, come on, I don't have all day, I've got a lot on and I need to change." Izuku just looked back at the main building before reluctantly following the woman to the right of the building, where a limo with blacked-out windows was waiting. Just as he was about to ask what was going on, the door to the limo was opened by the driver who was standing next to it, apparently waiting for him. All Might greeted him in his normal form, the skeleton of a man wearing a yellow suit with a blue tie that looked ridiculously large on his slender frame. "Young Midoriya, please come and take a seat," All Might gestured to Izuku, who quickly got in the seat. All Might gave the woman a thankful nod before the door closed and the car started to move. "All Might, what is going on?" Izuku shifted a little in his seat, his eyes glancing out the windows as the limo started driving through his large campus, worry rising in his chest. "I'm supposed to be taking the entrance test in a few moments." "Yes, well, I've talked with Gran Torino, and we think it's best if you don't take the regular entrance exam." Toshi shifted forward, looking at his successor, whose emerald eyes he still found it hard to look into. "So I had your application to the standard exam pulled." "Oh, of course," Izuku deflated, feeling the worry in his stomach turn to stone and sink him into his seat, as reality finally caught up with him. "I'm sorry I wasted your time, sir. I guess you'll want me to return your Kadash." "Whoa. Kid, slow down," Toshi smiled, chuckling a little as Izuku's face went from one of resigned depression to confusion. "You misunderstand, I had you pulled from the standard exam because you can't do both the standard and the recommendation entrance exam." "Wait, what?" Izuku's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He had only dared to dream of attending UA. Going as a recommended student was beyond belief. "You had someone recommend me?" "Not someone I did. As the #1 hero and alumni, I get first choice. I've just never used it before." Toshi smiled as he saw the sheer shock of wonder and disbelief at his words. "My teacher reminded me of the more complicated issues at play with us, and you also deserve this. It gives you your best start on the path before you." I thank you." Izuku bowed to his mentor and idled the act a little awkward in the back of the limo, but the gesture carried its meaning over. "So, what do I do for the recommendation exam?" "There is a written test and interview. The hard part, though, is the obstacle course, which is also a race against 5 other recommended students. The most promising students in the country. Are you ready?" "Yes, All Might I am," Izuku replied, trying to sound as confident and justify All Might's trust in him, even if inside he was screaming. "Good. Oh, and please remember it's Mr. Yagi while in this form, okay?" Toshi gently reminded his student, who quickly nodded before looking away and was trying to hide his panic at what was coming from the small voice in his head. "Hey, just do your best, I believe in you." Recommendation exam course, UA High School, late February. To say Izuku was a little bit wary of competing with the other young people around him was an understatement. His nerves weren't helped by the fact that he hadn't seen All Might since they were separated when he went to take the written exam, and he was starting to feel anxious again. The written test they had just taken had mentally all but beaten him to a pulp. It had been the hardest test he had ever taken. Although he had answered every question, there were some he had honestly just guessed at, which was a first for him. The interview, too, had been terrifying. He had been seated in a room with only a chair and a glass mirror, and asked a series of questions and scenarios with no prep time from people behind what he quickly figured was a one-way mirror. He had stumbled through the questions, which were fired one after another and at times with no connection or seeming reason. One would be what he would do in a scenario of helping an old lady, and then the next would be about his favorite food, why he liked it. However, he put those thoughts aside and started to stretch, seeing the other recommended students doing the same as they approached the very large obstacle course before them. He felt a little self-conscious. Everyone was wearing what seemed to be very expensive head-end sports gear, and here he was in a light green tracksuit his mom had picked up from a discount rack. As he looked over everyone, his eyes immediately went to and then avoided one girl in particular, who had drawn a lot of attention as she was wearing very little. Because it was February, everyone had elected for tracksuits or similar clothing. The girl in question was wearing what could generally be called shorts and a sleeveless top that he was just going to call a CRP top and not what it actually looked like. However, as his eyes went from her, he was greeted by a boy with white and red hair who just seemed to be staring daggers at seemingly nothing all the time. The boy looked at him and just gave a huff before going back to staring angrily at the world. In his distraction, Izuku missed how close he had gotten to someone and knocked into a boy behind him. "Oh, excuse me, my apologies, I was being careless." The boy apologized, giving him a deep bow that resulted in him almost slamming his head into the ground. Izuku backed up, and as the boy stood upright, he was greeted for the first time in a while, someone a good few inches taller than him. The boy was wearing a light blue high-collar tracksuit. He had black hair which was in a buzz cut and seemed to have the most enthusiastic smile he had ever seen. "No, sorry, it was my fault." Izuku gave his own bow as he apologized. He gave the taller boy the best smile he could, hoping it would take the edge off of his nerves. "Just a bit overexcited, I guess. It's a big moment." "Oh, sorry, I'm Izuku by the way." "I'm Inesa. It's a pleasure to meet you, Izuku. I'm so excited to be here at UA and competing with the best." The now named Inesa seemed to have only one level, and that was complete and utter passion, that seemed to only increase as he punched the air in his excitement. "I'm so freaking pumped for this." "Are you?" Yeah, I am." Izuku couldn't help but smile and tried to match Inesa's passion, which just earned him a few raised eyebrows from the other students, but an even broader smile from the taller boy. "Let's do our best." Oh yeah. Inesa somehow just reached a new level as he suddenly pulled Izuku into a half hug and punched the air. "Let's do this. I'm digging the vibe, bros. Boo, we are on schedule, so get moving, okay?" The very loud voice caused everyone to jump as they turned to see the pro hero present Mike standing, waiting for them. "Come on, we don't have all day. Everyone get over here so we can get this party started." Everyone rushed over and found themselves divided into groups of 6 by UA faculty staff, who then gave each of them a number that stuck to the front of their clothing. He found himself in a group with Inesa and the dual-haired boy who had ignored him earlier. Inesa just gave him a massive smile and a thumbs up as they waited for instructions. Inesa's enthusiasm only seemed to increase as he saw the look of pure joy on Izuku's face as the boy stared in awe as Present Mike explained the rules and structure of the test. "Okay, get stepping when your group is called up, okay?" Present Mike was his usual self, complete with over-the-top gestures and a broad smile as he showed the UA hopefuls what they were up against. This practical test takes the form of a killer 3-kilometer race. But as you can see, it's an obstacle course, so you can't just run through it. Use your quirks to reach the finish. He didn't say if we are being passed on winning our respective races, or if this is time-based or if there is a grading system. Izuku's mind went into overdrive as he looked over the course as the first group of students stepped up to the starting line. However, he wasn't able to glean anything from the race, as apart from the starting gate and the initial obstacle that was a sudden step incline followed by a large gap that had to be jumped, the rest of the course wasn't visible. He found that he didn't have to wait long and that it was very quickly his group's turn. As he took his place, he received and returned a smile from Inesa as they waited for the rest to start, the other students' eagerness helping to relax him a little. He tensed as he turned on One for All, feeling the rush of energy that he was careful to keep at only 8%, and even that currently felt uncomfortable. He turned his head to see that Inesa had some kind of wind quirk as the air swirled around him, lifting him off the ground, his eager smile turning into complete focus. He also spied ice building up underneath the dual-haired boy's right foot, which he guessed was the boy's quirk, and wondered if he was producing ice or removing heat from the AI. Green. Izuku's mind snapped into focus as the starting light skipped amber, going straight to green. He was quick to react, along with Inesa, the doll-haired boy and another boy who seemed to be softening the ground. The other two competitors immediately fell behind as the four boys rocketed down the track, with Izuku finding himself in a constant three-way struggle for the lead. As they leapt over the gap in the track, Izuku caught Inesa's eye and just smiled at him. He returned the smile as the two pushed even harder to take the lead. The course blurred by in a series of increasingly difficult obstacles, each one Izuku managed to just overcome, and he somehow found himself still tied for first with the other two boys. This course is insane. Izuku's thought was accompanied as he, Inesa and the doll-haired boy rounded around the final bend, having just punched their way past a series of robots that had come after a tunnel filled with lasers, which they had reached by climbing up a rock wall whose holds had shifted every few seconds. Yue was not messing around. He was starting to feel his body straining as this was both the longest and most intense PRD. He had kept one for all activated at 8%. However, this was the final stretch, and he found that he and Inesa were in the lead neck and neck as the confined area of the course disappeared, opening up into a field with the finish appearing in the distance as a red line on the ground. Suddenly, he felt a blast of cold air hit him as the dual-haired boy blasted past them. Ice poured out of his right foot, pushing him forward at blinding speeds. He looked at Inesa, whose eyes narrowed at the other boy before a look of determination appeared, and suddenly Inesa shot forward in one last burst of speed. "Come on, Izuku, for all might, for mom, go plus ultra." Izuku felt something bruising as he pushed past his 8% to streak forward to catch up. It was close as all three boys reached the finish line simultaneously. It was going to be a photo finish. Izuku pushed his hand forward to try to be the first over the line, whilst Inesa threw his whole body forward into a skid, hoping his outstretched leg would win it, whilst the doll-haired boy lunged forward as well. Wow, number 41 wins by a hair, number 23 and 79 tie for second. Present Mike announced the result. All three boys became aware of his presence at the finish line. Now the race was over. As the boys caught their breath, Present Mike looked at the results, his eyes widening as he saw their results. The boys had not only scored high on the points allotted for each section of the course, they had smashed the time requirements too. They were a full 3 minutes faster than the allotted time limit. He quickly put on a proud smile as he looked at the three newest additions to UA. This year was going to be very promising with these three in the mix. All right, I won. But who knows what will happen next time? Inesa punched the air in triumph but quickly turned to smile at Izuku and the other boy. "You were both amazing. Izuku, you were incredible. I'm guessing you must be Endeavor's kid, right? That's so awesome dash." "Shut up," the dual-haired boy just snarled out his blunt statement, not bothering to look at either of them, his eyes still burning with disdain. "I just came here to pass some stupid test. I don't care if I beat you or not, so give it a rest. You're in my way, nothing else." Izuku watched Inesa freeze as the other boy just walked off. The taller boy just seemed to be in a state of shock as he watched Endeavor's son walk away. Izuku's eyes followed the boy for a few seconds before turning back to the boy who, since he had met him, had been so full of passion and drive. "Hey, Inesa." Izuku's voice broke the wind quirk user out of his haze as he looked at the other boy who smiled at him. "You did really great. Congratulations on winning. I hope to see you at UA if I get in." Inesa blinked at Izuku's words, his eyes going from the green-haired boy to the retreating figure who had, for a moment, broken his constant passion and enthusiasm. However, before Izuku could say anything, Inesa's massive smile returned as he found Inesa again pulling him into a half-hug as he punched the air. Izuku could only chuckle at the boy's passion, ignoring the part of his brain that noted Inesa seemingly had no trouble with invading personal space. "What are you saying? Of course you got in." Inesa's enthusiastic shout was loud enough that Izuku saw a group in the distance turn to look at them. "You were freaking unbelievable. I can't wait to compete again in UA. You and I are going to show everyone our passion." "Thanks, but let's wait for the results. I only got second. I might not have made the CU dash." Izuku pulled himself from Inesa's grasp, his more rational side trying to keep his expectations realistic. This was UA's second place might not be enough. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, my amigos. Present Mix's voice caused the two boys to turn around as he gave them a broad smile. Great thing about the recommendation exam, and oh, waiting. I can officially say both of you will be getting offers. Welcome to you. Izuku couldn't help the smile that appeared on his face, as the world was drowned out around him. Not even Inase's passionate cheers reached his ears, as one thought consumed him. I did it, I really did it. Mom is going to be so proud. Midoriya family apartment, Mizufu, Japan, March. Inko was tapping her foot as she sat on the living room couch, her eyes darting back to her son's room, and she heard the muffled sounds of the recording being played. She and Izuku already knew he had been accepted into UA. The holographic acceptance letter was merely a formality, as he had passed the recommendation exam. No, she wasn't nervous about him getting in, it was the how that bothered her. When he had left, he had been enrolled in the public examination open to all who had the grades, but when he came back, he had a provisional acceptance letter from the highly exclusive recommendation course. How in hell had that happened? She might not be the most clued into the hero scene these days, but she, like everyone else, knew about UA's recommendation route, which required someone with a lot of pull to get a spot. So, who had recommended Izuku? Who had her baby meet or knew that could get him on that route? She hadn't questioned her boy yet about it, mainly because she was still so confused at what had happened and the past week had just gone by in an insane blur. One name flashed in her mind, but she quickly shot it down. If Izuku had met his father, All Might, he would have said something. Hell, he would have talked about it for the rest of his life. So it couldn't have been Toshinori, could it? The sound of Izuku's bedroom door caused her to stop tapping her foot and place a broad smile on her face as her son appeared smiling and holding a dozen forms. He quickly sat down across from her, kneeling on the floor as he showed her the UA forms he had to fill out. They were the standard type but also included a costume design and one about any special requirements needed for his quirk. She didn't really hear anything her son said as he just spoke in the family's infamous fast-paced ramble as he went through the forms, sorting them out into piles of priority. Izuku. Inko's voice was quiet, but her sudden act of talking caused her son to stop his ramble and look at her. Are you sure you want to do this? Be a hero, I'm so proud, don't get me wrong, and I will support you with whatever you want, but you only just got your quirk. Maybe you could consider something else. Mom, I get it. Izuku stood up, moving over to sit next to her. His height so much like his father's made her feel so much more worried, as he gave her a smile that to her was all Toshi. I know it's a lot of change, but I'm learning more control of my quirk. I don't hurt myself anymore, and I wanted this all my life. I know, I just... Inko released a sigh, as she looked into her son's wide, hopeful eyes, her heart pulling in two directions as old fears fought against her longing to help her son. I'm just worried about you, about this quirk of yours, and if UA is the best place for you. Mom, don't worry, he is the best. Izuku placed his hand over hers, giving it a comforting squeeze as he tried to dispel his mom's worry, which he only loved her for. She was always looking out for him. And this will help. You'll never guess who is teaching at UA this year. Who? Inko asked, slight curiosity in her eyes, wondering who would be teaching at UA that would apparently settle her fears for her son's safety. All Might, Izuku announced proudly, knowing that with the knowledge that the symbol of peace was going to be teaching him, his mother's worries would certainly less. Izuku jumped as every small item in the room suddenly flew towards his mom, her quirk violently pulling them to her. None of them reached her, as the involuntary quirk activation stopped only a second later, but several of the heavier objects had slammed into the table, and a few of the fragile ones broke. Izuku looked around and opened his mouth to say something, but the look on her face stopped him dead in his tracks. What did you just say? Inko's voice was like the cold before a blizzard breaking forth as she just looked at her son. All Might is going to be my teacher. Izuku's voice was almost as light as whisper as he had no idea what he had just done. Be yesterday. Inko shot to her feet, her quirk again, causing items to shift towards her as she stared down at her son, who fell backwards into the apartment's sole armchair. He's been the one training you, hasn't he? Hasn't he? Izuku could only nod as his mother's sudden blinding fury and rage stopped any attempt at falsehood from even forming in his head. Inko's face just became one of even greater fury as she shot her hand out to him, gesturing for him to hand something over to her. "Give me your phone. Right now, young man. Right now." Inko didn't have to wait even a second as Izuku pulled his phone out of his pocket. The item was pulled from his grasp by his mother's quirk. Inko opened the phone up, guessing her son's password on the first try, All Might, and she poured through his contacts until she found it. Toshinori Yagi was listed right there plain as day, and she could see Izuku had been messaging and calling him for nearly a year. She pressed the call button and just shot Izuku a look as the boy opened his mouth to say something, but quickly decided against it. "Young Midoriya, I do apologize but I'm in the middle of something, so unless this is an emergency I will call you busy dash," Toshinori's voice sounded out. And if Inko hadn't been so angry, she would have lost her nerve right there and then. "Oh no, you don't, you are going to speak with me right now and explain what the hell you think you've been doing. With my son. Mine." Inko blasted out her anger, knowing she had to say it now before the confidence her rage was giving her left her, and allowed Toshi to come up with some excuse for his disgusting behavior. "How dare you go behind my back to speak to Izuku? I never thought you would stoop so low, be so cowardly. I mean really, Toshi, what went through your goddamn mind?" "Inko." Toshi's voice was almost so quiet that Inko couldn't hear it over her heavy breathing, his mind in complete shock at hearing her voice, not to mention what she was yelling at him. "I don't know what Is Izuku your child? Oh, don't give me that. Don't insult me by playing dumb. You know what did? You showed him how to use his quirk, didn't you? Thought that was the best way to worm your way in and keep him from telling me that he met you. Well, I know I hit him. It might have been wrong but he's my son and you don't get to do this." Do what? Toshi's mind was reeling as literally the strangest thing that ever occurred to him unfolded. "Play the number 1 hero card. To get to know your son." Inko's age blinded her to the fact that Izuku didn't miss what she had said, and his eyes just widened in shock as his heart nearly stopped. "I know I didn't know how to help Izuku with his quirk or get him into UA. Or really help him, I know that. But that doesn't give you the excuse to go behind my back to have a relationship with Izuku. I know you're mad at me, but you should have talked to." Inko trailed off as her rage and anger stopped as she saw Izuku's face as he looked at her like she had just hit him with a truck and then reversed over him. The room went silent, even Inko's heavy breathing vanished as she awkwardly stared at her son, as she realized that he didn't know. Whatever Toshi had been doing behind her back, he hadn't revealed his actual relationship to Izuku. She wasn't sure if that was better or worse, but it certainly made this very, very awkward. "Oh God, you didn't tell him?" Inko just spoke into the phone, hoping to delay the very awkward and difficult conversation she was about to have with her son for at least a few minutes. "Izuku is my son." Toshi's words caused all the blood to drain from Inko's face as she realized that Toshi's confusion hadn't been fake and what had just happened so much worse than just awkwardness. "Oh God." Inko's mind, which usually worked so analytically and precisely, for the first time ever just went blank. No plan, no constant worry or worst-case scenario rearing to life, just complete shutdown. "William, oh God."